Hey there, sleepyheads. Welcome back to the channel. Before we drift into tonight's tale of Archivist of Forgotten Adventures, I'd love to know, where in the world are you watching from tonight? And what time is it for you right now? Drop it in the comments below. It's always magical seeing how far and wide this sleepy little community reaches. All right, lights low, blankets up, let's begin. Tonight we drift quietly into the first chamber of the Cosmic Library, a place where sound barely dares to linger, and even the dust seems to float more slowly, as if respecting the ancient hush. These are the aisles where lost timelines sleep, resting like forgotten books whose pages still breathe with faint warmth. The air here always feels a little older, a little heavier with memory, as though every unrealized version of Ooos is gently exhaling around us. The archivist moves softly, as if not to wake the drifting fragments of history. Each step is measured, unhurried, nudging ripples of golden dust that swirl lazily before settling again. This is the part of the library where timelines that began but were never allowed to fully bloom are laid to rest. Not destroyed, not erased, simply placed on high, patient shelves where their stories can dream themselves quietly into eternity. Some of these lost timelines glow beautifully, their spines shimmering with faint blues and soft greens, suggesting worlds where the sky took on a different hue, or where magic formed a gentler rhythm. Others look more fragile, cracked slightly along the edges, as though time had stretched too thin and left them brittle. And a few, the rarest of them all, appear almost blank, as if the universe had taken a breath to begin a story but never finished its first whisper. The archivist runs a hand along these spines, tracing that delicate shimmer of unrealized fate. They know every one of these timelines by heart. Worlds where the Mushroom War ended in peace instead of fire. Worlds where candy people never gained their bright sentience, existing instead as simple shapes of sugar drifting in wind. And worlds where Finn the human, brave, wide-eyed Finn, never existed at all. Not because tragedy silenced him, but because the universe simply chose another path. In one timeline, Ooos healed before he could be born. In another, destiny decided it did not need a hero that. The archivist pauses beside a particularly thin volume, its spine curled inward like a leaf pressed too tightly for too long. This timeline once carried great promise. It was meant to tell a quieter version of Ooos' history, where magic was rare and the land spoke with the soft cadence of a forgotten lullaby. But something in its foundations wavered, the story dimmed, and before the first adventure could unfold, the universe set it gently aside, letting it drift into this aisle where unfinished dreams come to rest. Farther down the aisle lies a case filled with flickering shards of what look like stained glass. These are not books nor scrolls, but timeline splinters, small echoes that were never large enough to manifest their own world. They hum faintly, releasing tiny motes of light that scatter like sleepy fireflies. If the archivist leans close enough, they can sometimes hear these splinters murmuring echoes of scenes that never happen. Finn laughing with a version of Jake who had wings instead of stretchy powers. Bubblegum ruling a kingdom carved from crystalline orchids. Ice King rewriting his entire crown's history in a moment of clarity that no universe ever allowed him to keep. This aisle teaches the archivist something essential, that potential is its own kind of existence. Even a story that never unfolded still leaves a mark, a soft contour pressed into the fabric of possibility. Yet not all the lost timelines glow. Some sit in a gentle dimness, wrapped in muted colors that suggest longing rather than promise. These are timelines that tried very hard to happen. Worlds that lean forward eagerly but stumble just before taking shape. The archivist treats these with the deepest care. To press too firmly on their spines might erase what little memory remains, but to ignore them would be to deny the quiet truth that every story, real or unreal, holds meaning. The shelves stretch impossibly far here, bending in soft curves that defy geometric logic. They weave in wide arcs, creating corridors that feel more like drifting currents of dream stuff than solid hallways. The archivist knows these paths well. They could walk them in darkness, guided only by the faint heartbeat of forgotten possibility. Tonight they stop at a shelf lined with timelines that shimmer in dusty shades of violet. These belong to the almost worlds, universes that reached the brink of becoming, but folded gently inward when reality shifted course. In one of these, Finn and Jake were destined to travel far beyond Ooos, becoming guardians of distant star realms. In another, the land of O never emerged from the ruins, instead remaining a quiet wasteland dotted with strange metal flowers and echoes of ancient humanity. These stories never gained enough momentum to stabilize, but the impressions they left behind are soft, wistful, and strangely comforting. The archivist lifts one of these violet timelines carefully. It's light, almost weightless, like holding a memory instead of an object. Within it flickers the faint outline of a version of Ooos with 2 moons instead of 1. The tides shaped the land differently there. The forest grew tall and spiraled upward in twisting forms, creating natural stairways to the clouds. Magic flowed more slowly, pooling in deep wells that characters could sip from like gentle fountains. Finn, in that world, would have grown up with an almost shapeless sense of wonder, feeling the pull of the twin moons long before he could speak. But the world never unfolded far enough for him to open his eyes. This is where the archivist begins tonight's study, right here among these shelves of half-shimmering, half-slumbering timelines. As they lower the fragment into their palms, the glow brightens ever so slightly, as if the timeline recognizes being remembered. The archivist walks slowly down the aisle, carrying the violet timeline as if cradling a small, fragile star. The soft light from the fragment illuminates the shelves around them, revealing more worlds waiting quietly in the dim. Some flicker like candles in a gentle breeze. Others are so faint that they seem nearly invisible, barely more than outlines pressed into the fabric of possibility. Each holds its own quiet story, a path that the universe considered but ultimately set aside. Some timelines are chaotic, almost restless. These are the ones that struggled against their own beginnings. Magic here was too eager, bending itself into patterns that couldn't quite hold. In one, Candy Kingdom grew wildly, its inhabitants transforming unpredictably, creating sugary forests that moved as if alive. In another, Ice King's crown drew too many stray threads of fate, twisting reality around him until time itself wobbled. The archivist runs a finger lightly along the spines, sensing the tension that never resolved. These are the timelines that whisper of what might have been and almost happened, their soft murmurs stirring faint shivers of curiosity and melancholy. And yet there are also timelines of gentle stillness, worlds that could have been calm, tender, and quiet. In one, Finn never became a hero, but a wanderer who listened to the wind, hearing stories that no one else could. Jake in that world had a quieter magic, the kind that stretched not with exuberance, but with patience, wrapping friends in a comforting warmth rather than leaping into chaos. Bubblegum ruled not with urgency or invention, but with the slow, deliberate care of someone tending a garden over centuries. These timelines do not hum or flicker. They breathe in silence, resting, patient, as though waiting for a dreamer to remember them fully. The archivist pauses before a shelf that glows with a soft amber light, almost like the last embers of a dying fire. These are the fragile memory worlds, the ones that only exist when someone recalls them. A single thought, a fleeting imagination, or a quiet wish could make them shimmer and expand, though only briefly. One such timeline shows a version of Ooos where Marceline never became a vampire. Instead, she roamed the lands as a human, with faint traces of her old powers lingering in her fingertips. The forests in that world had subtle hums of music when the wind moved through them, as though the land itself remembered her song even before she had sung it. Walking further, the archivist encounters a row of thinner volumes, almost translucent. These are the gossamer timelines, fragile threads that were started but unraveled almost immediately. One depicts Finn and Jake in a world where magic never existed at all. Without the strange forces of enchantment, the lands are quiet, contemplative, and a little lonely. The Candy people, if they appear at all, are simple shapes of sugar and light, unaware of the joy and chaos that magic would have brought. And yet, even in their quiet, there is a strange beauty, a slow, undisturbed rhythm that almost soothes the soul. The archivist leans closer, reading fragments of these gossamer worlds. Words shimmer in dream script along the edges of the pages, phrases like, "The wind remembers," "The moon slept longer than usual, and he would never know, yet still dream." It is as if the universe had spoken in half-formed whispers, and now only someone who truly listens can understand. They let a finger trace the writing gently, feeling the faint pulse of possibility beneath their touch. Somewhere in the far corner of the aisle, the archivist notices a shelf that is mostly empty. Only a single volume rests there, illuminated by a faint, silvery glow. This is the timeline that almost erased itself entirely. Its story is delicate, hesitant, like a candle flickering in a vast hall. Here, the Mushroom War never fully took place, yet echoes of it remain. Scattered ruins, soft memories of what might have been, and a world on the cusp of adventure that never quite arrived. The archivist sets the violet fragment beside the silvered volume, noting how the two worlds interact in subtle ways, their energies brushing softly, creating gentle pulses of potential. Each timeline, no matter how faint or fractured, carries its own lesson. They teach patience, the quiet power of stories unspoken, and the delicate balance between what exists and what could have existed. As the archivist moves through these aisles, they are not simply cataloging or observing. They are listening, remembering, and allowing the worlds to rest while holding them gently in memory. The aisle stretches on and on, vanishing into soft shadows and whispered lights. Time feels suspended here, slowed by the weight of all these lost possibilities. And yet, despite the silence, there is a subtle rhythm, a heartbeat of worlds waiting quietly, inviting anyone who passes to linger and reflect. The archivist breathes in this rhythm, letting it settle like a warm blanket around them, and continues their careful journey through the endless aisles of lost timelines. A soft glow ahead hints at a particularly interesting timeline. Its light pulses slowly, as if beckoning the archivist closer. This one is unusual, shimmering with deep indigos and soft silvers. It seems to contain fragments of multiple almost worlds combined, a layered reality that almost defied the usual rules. Finn exists here, but his presence is different, more contemplative, almost ethereal. Jake's form stretches and twists in unexpected ways, sometimes taking the shape of shadows or reflections rather than solid flesh. Even the Candy people, faint as whispers, seem aware of this world's fragile impermanence. The archivist pauses before this volume, resting their hands lightly on its spine. They can sense the tender hum of possibilities vibrating through it, each fragment of history brushing against one another like waves in a silent ocean. For a moment, the Isles seem to hold their breath, and the archivist allows themselves to simply feel the quiet pulse of these nearly forgotten Ooos. Every footstep, every touch, is a gentle acknowledgement that even in forgotten worlds, stories have a presence, a soft resonance that refuses to vanish entirely. Here in the Isles where lost timelines sleep, the archivist realizes something profound, that even the worlds that never fully bloomed, even the stories that were abandoned before they could speak, carry a weight, a resonance, a quiet magic. And as they cradle these fragile shards of unrealized adventures, the soft hush of the library wraps around them like a lullaby, guiding both the archivist and any wandering listener gently deeper into the endless possibilities of Oo. The archivist lifts the layered indigo timeline with utmost care, letting its soft pulse guide their path deeper into the aisle. Each shelf around them seems to lean ever so slightly, as if drawn to the warmth of this fragile story. In this part of the library, the air feels thick with quiet expectation, almost like the world itself is holding a gentle, patient breath. Time is softer here, more pliant, curling around the edges of the aisles and slowing the archivist's steps into a calm, deliberate rhythm. As they move, tiny motes of light drift lazily through the air, responding to the pulse of the timelines. Each mote contains a whisper, a fleeting memory of a world that almost was. In one, the skies of Oo shimmered in pale lavender rather than the familiar azure, and rivers wound slowly like liquid glass, reflecting the stars even in daylight. In another, the Ice King never found his crown, leaving Simon untouched by magic, and thus unaware of the tragic weight that had shaped his existence in the main timeline. Each memory drifts past in silence, a gentle echo of what might have been, settling softly against the archivist's awareness, leaving an almost imperceptible warmth in its passing. The archivist pauses before a particularly narrow shelf, its edges dim and almost trembling. This contains timelines that fractured mid-creation, universes that started forming but then hesitated, unsure of their own place in reality. One volume hums faintly in a way that feels almost like a heartbeat, slow and steady but impossible to synchronize with the physical world outside. Within it is a version of Oo where Finn never held a sword. Battles were waged, not with blades, but with whispered words and soft gestures of courage. Magic was quieter, subtler, more intimate, bending not the land but the hearts of those who dwelled within it. The archivist runs their fingers lightly along the spine, feeling the resonance vibrate through their hand, like touching the surface of a calm lake. Farther down, the aisles curve and twist unexpectedly, bending in ways that defy normal spatial understanding. Here lie the timelines that were started in haste, pulled into existence by sudden bursts of magical energy that could not sustain themselves. Some of these are jagged, their edges flickering with light and shadow, suggesting worlds that teetered on the edge of being and nothingness. One such timeline depicts a candy kingdom where Marceline's music never took form, leaving the land without melody. The candy citizens move without rhythm, their lives flowing in soft, silent repetition, as if the world itself had forgotten the joy of song. Another shows a land of Oo untouched by the Mushroom War, quiet and solemn, with magic lying dormant like seeds beneath the soil, waiting for someone who never came. The archivist lingers over a row of almost invisible timelines, pressing gently to reveal their hidden glimmers. These contain subtle variations of events known in other worlds, delicate shifts that never fully manifested. Finn may have met Jake slightly later, or Bubblegum may have taken a different approach to ruling her kingdom, or the Ice King may have discovered a different path to wisdom. These threads of possibility are faint, but each one hums with a quiet insistence that they once wanted to exist fully. The archivist listens to them like a lullaby, noting how even unrealized moments carry the weight of emotion and intention. As they continue, the archivist reaches a small alcove where light bends softly, illuminating a cluster of timelines unlike any they have seen so far. These are the woven almost worlds, timelines that share fragments of other universes layered together in a delicate, multidimensional tapestry. In this patchwork, Finn is not just one boy, but many, each existing in subtle variations across overlapping realities. Jake's form flows and shifts, sometimes stretching across dimensions, carrying laughter from one timeline to another. Bubblegum's experiments sometimes succeed and sometimes fail, leaving trails of innovation and gentle regret across the threads of these near worlds. The archivist can sense the fragile balance here. Even the lightest misstep might unravel the delicate weave, and yet the beauty of it is undeniable, a quiet testament to possibility. The archivist kneels, holding the tapestry of almost worlds carefully, letting it settle like a warm, pulsating glow in their hands. They close their eyes for a moment, feeling the rhythm of these worlds pulse gently against their chest. Every heartbeat echoes softly with the life of universes that never fully awakened, and every exhale carries the quiet weight of stories suspended between being and not being. It is here, in the hushed folds of this cosmic library, that the archivist feels the true depth of what it means to witness lost timelines. It is not just observing what might have been. It is understanding the fragile, luminous nature of existence itself, where every possibility leaves a mark, a soft indentation upon the fabric of everything else. Nearby, a cluster of timelines shimmers with faint gold, each containing stories so delicate that even the archivist must approach them with reverence. In one, Finn and Jake live in a land of eternal twilight, their adventures marked by introspection rather than heroism, where courage is measured not in battles, but in quiet understanding. Another shows Ooos in a state of perpetual rain, where rain-soaked forests reflect the dreams of all its inhabitants. In these worlds, magic is more subtle than anywhere else. Soft rivers of energy flowing like gentle wind through the land, nudging characters toward choices that exist only in the gentlest of ripples. The archivist moves their hand along these golden spines, letting each story vibrate softly against their fingers. Each is a fragile memory, a possibility that brushed against reality but never fully crystallized. And yet in their imperfection, they are more poignant than fully realized worlds. They hold a quiet, wistful beauty that speaks not of triumph or adventure, but of the soft, almost imperceptible moments that could have been. Settling the indigo timeline back on its shelf, the archivist exhales slowly, letting the soft hum of the lost timelines mingle with the faint pulse of their own heartbeat. The aisle stretches endlessly beyond, a corridor of whispered stories shimmering with light that is both faint and eternal. Somewhere in the distance, the faint glimmer of yet another timeline calls, a soft flicker that promises worlds even more fragile and beautiful than those already explored. The archivist steps forward, letting the soft, steady rhythm of forgotten adventures guide their way deeper into the quiet, luminous heart of this cosmic library. The archivist's footsteps echo softly against the polished floor of the aisle, though even the echo feels muted, as if the air itself absorbs sound to protect the delicate slumber of these forgotten timelines. Each step brings them closer to a cluster of volumes that glow with a faint, opalescent light. These are the shadowed timelines, worlds that almost existed, yet were never fully embraced by possibility. Their light is soft and wavering, like moonlight reflected on a calm lake, constantly shifting and effracting, hinting at lives that might have been but were never lived. The archivist reaches out to touch one of these opalescent volumes. Instantly, a faint vibration runs through their fingers, and for a heartbeat, they are flooded with the quiet sense of a world that is almost alive. In this place, Oo is a landscape of gentle murmurs and soft echoes. Candy Kingdom exists but is uninhabited, its sweet streets deserted yet humming faintly with residual magic. Trees sway without wind, rivers flow in gentle spirals, and clouds drift lazily across skies tinged with lavender and silver. It is a world suspended, neither here nor completely gone, a universe that lingers in that tender space between dreaming and waking. As the archivist studies the volume, they begin to see the subtle contours of its story. Finn exists in this world, but only in glimpses, a fleeting shadow at the edge of a forest, the echo of footsteps on candy cobblestone. Jake follows, yet he is different, more like a reflection of memory than a living being. His laughter soft and distant, like wind chimes swaying in a half-forgotten dream. Even bubblegum is present, tending to gardens that grow quietly in the absence of any audience. Her actions almost ritualistic, performed out of an innate understanding of care rather than necessity. The archivist smiles faintly, knowing that even in unrealized worlds, these characters carry the essence of who they are meant to be, shaped by possibility rather than circumstance. The next set of timelines that the archivist examines hum with a faint golden glow. These are what they call tempered timelines, stories that were started carefully, as if the universe itself had wanted them to succeed, yet something subtle caused them to falter. In one such world, the Ice King retained his sanity, never succumbing to the crown's influence, and lived quietly among humans, tending small, thoughtful acts of kindness that rippled outward imperceptibly. Another shows Marceline as a wanderer of sound, shaping landscapes with her music but never becoming the vampire queen we know. The archivist traces these stories gently, feeling the rhythm of their potential and the faint disappointment of their unrealized fruition. It is not sorrowful, but quietly instructive, teaching that even near-successful timelines have a resonance, a lesson, a soft echo of meaning that persists beyond time. A particularly intriguing shelf catches the archivist's attention. It is narrower than the others, almost hidden, yet faint light seeps from its edges. These timelines are extraordinarily rare, intertwined almost worlds, where multiple realities brushed against each other, overlapping in subtle, fragile ways. Here Finn may exist in one dimension as a hero, while in another he walks quietly, contemplative, almost invisible. Jake stretches across worlds, sometimes forming bridges between these overlapping realities, carrying laughter, worry, and gentle curiosity from one existence to another. Bubblegum's knowledge is shared across these intertwined layers, her consciousness subtly aware of variations she may never inhabit fully. The archivist watches, recognizing the complexity and fragility of such tapestry, aware that even the smallest misstep could unravel the delicate connections that hold it together. The archivist pauses, settling the indigo and opalescent timelines back onto their respective shelves. They take a moment to breathe, listening to the faint murmurs of these worlds, the soft vibrations of stories nearly lived. It is a symphony of what might have been, gentle and slow, soothing in its rhythm and quiet persistence. In this part of the library, the passage of time seems different, longer stretching to allow the nearly real to exist without hurry, without interference. Every possibility has its moment here, every echo its chance to hum. No matter how softly, into the vast quiet of existence. Further along, the archivist finds a section that seems almost alive, the shelves themselves curving slightly, pulsing with faint light, as though breathing in tandem with the timelines they hold. These are the reverent almost worlds, universes that almost shaped Oo's history in ways both large and small. Finn here carries the quiet weight of knowledge, walking paths lined not with battles, but with discoveries. Jake, gentle and elastic, mirrors possibilities in subtle ways, reflecting choices that were never made. Even Ice King and Marceline have small roles, existing without tragedy or conflict, their lives serene, almost meditative. The archivist lingers, noting how the air itself feels different here, imbued with soft harmony, a calm reminder that even unrealized adventures leave behind a warmth that persists. Finally, the archivist comes to a low shelf nearly at floor level, where the timelines are small, fragile, almost translucent. These are the whispered worlds, stories that barely touched existence, yet somehow left a trace of resonance in the library. One contains a version of Oo where Candy Kingdom never existed as a kingdom, but as scattered, living sugar forms drifting gently across the landscape. Another shows a Finn who never discovered heroism, yet still wandered the world, learning the quiet truths of nature and magic without intervention. These whispered worlds are delicate, almost invisible, yet the archivist treats them with utmost care, recognizing that their subtleness does not diminish their importance. As the archivist steps back and surveys the aisle in its entirety, a soft understanding settles over them. Every lost timeline, every flickering shard of possibility, contributes to the quiet rhythm of the universe. They are reminders that creation is not simply a matter of outcomes, but of intention, patience, and the gentle care of attention. Even stories that were never fully written, adventures that never fully lived, carry a presence that whispers softly into eternity. In this aisle, where lost timelines sleep, the archivist feels the quiet heartbeat of what might have been. It is a rhythm of patience and wonder, a gentle song for anyone willing to listen. They breathe slowly, letting the light of these almost worlds wash over them, and as they do, the universe feels just a little softer, a little more infinite, and a little more tender. Here in the quiet glow of forgotten Ooos, the first step of tonight's journey finds its place, resting gently, waiting to drift further into the endless halls of the cosmic library. The archivist steps softly from the aisle of lost timelines into a broader chamber where the light feels heavier, more fractured, as though the air itself remembers the weight of worlds that no longer hold together. Here the broken universes sleep, not in calm slumber, but in quiet, trembling pause. The shelves are wider, bending irregularly, and the floor beneath hums faintly with vibrations that seem to ripple outward from shards of reality. This part of the library is not serene. It is alive with the memory of failure, with the echoes of universes that tried to exist and then fractured under the strain of impossibility. Each broken universe has its own resonance, its own whisper of existence. Some hum with sharp, metallic pulses like the clang of swords never wielded or machinery left to rust before it could serve its purpose. Others vibrate with soft, watery currents, as if time itself runs in loops that were never meant to meet. The archivist moves carefully, their fingers brushing along the spines of these fragile volumes, feeling the faint tug of energy that threatens to pull the stories apart if handled roughly. Here, a misplaced breath, a hurried glance, could unravel a universe completely, letting its echoes fade into nothingness. One particular shard of reality catches the archivist's eye. It glows with jagged, flickering light, the edges of its world bent at impossible angles. In this universe, magic itself seems unstable, pulsing in chaotic rhythms that ripple outward like waves in a storm-tossed sea. Rivers twist back upon themselves, mountains float briefly before falling, and the sky fractures into ever-shifting mosaics of color. Finn exists here, but he is not the same. His courage wavers, uncertain and hesitant, and his laughter, when it comes, is tinged with the faintest shimmer of fear. Jake follows, stretching across improbable angles, his body bending in ways that defy expectation, bridging fragments of reality that should not meet. Even the candy people are fractured, their forms occasionally splitting into echoes that flicker in and out of being. The Archivist leans closer, letting their senses adjust to the strange rhythm of this broken universe. They can almost hear the pulse of its magic, uneven and stuttering, carrying hints of events that almost happened. A battle paused mid-motion, a word of prophecy half-spoken, a song begun and left unfinished. These echoes swirl through the volume, tangling together in delicate, precarious harmony. To the untrained eye, it might seem chaotic, but the Archivist knows that even in brokenness, there is structure, a subtle pattern waiting to be recognized. Nearby, another shard shimmers with soft, muted light. This one is less chaotic, more melancholic, like a sigh captured in the air. It is a world where the Mushroom War never fully consumed the land, but its after-effects linger in strange, persistent ways. Forests grow twisted and slow, bending around invisible currents of lost magic. Rivers carry faint memories of forgotten spells, and the sky holds the colors that shift subtly with the unspoken emotions of those who never truly lived here. Finn and Jake exist, but they are more like whispers of themselves, shadows carrying the weight of potential unfulfilled. The Archivist watches quietly, feeling the resonance of these echoes settle gently in their chest, like a pulse of empathy for worlds that tried and faltered. Some broken universes are small, fragile fragments, no larger than a single book. They are the tiny echoes, moments of possibility that collapsed under their own contradictions. One shows Marceline wandering a silent world where music never took form, her voice a faint vibration across the land, unheard and unrecorded. Another depicts Ice King as a figure of tragic solitude, aware of his power but unable to control it, his intentions echoing in loops that never resolve. These are delicate, almost invisible threads, and the Archivist handles them as carefully as one would hold a newborn star. The chamber is quiet except for the soft hum of these fractured worlds, a sound that is almost musical in its unpredictability. Some echoes resonate with bright, shimmering pulses, hinting at adventures never undertaken or friendships never fully realized. Others throb gently with melancholy, carrying the weight of choices never made, paths never taken, and dreams abandoned before they could take form. The Archivist listens deeply, letting each vibration tell its story, piecing together the tapestry of what these broken universes might have been. Further along the chamber, the Archivist encounters a cluster of universes that seem almost liquid, their edges blurred and unstable. Here, time does not move linearly. Moments repeat, fold into themselves, and shimmer like reflections on water. Finn appears in multiple iterations, sometimes running toward an unknown danger, sometimes sitting quietly beneath a tree that grows and recedes in endless cycle. Jake stretches across realities, occasionally forming bridges between these repeating fragments, carrying laughter and memory from one unstable world to another. Bubblegum's presence is faint, her intellect diffused across overlapping possibilities, each idea only partially realized, yet leaving traces of ingenuity and care scattered through the timeline. The Archivist kneels to study one of the liquid shards more closely, feeling the subtle vibrations of its existence through their fingertips. It is a universe of contradictions, where events repeat in delicate loops, each cycle slightly altered, as if the world is testing its own limits. One moment, a battle is fought and won. The next, it resets to the same opening stance, characters frozen in anticipation. Magic spills unpredictably, creating fleeting moments of wonder, danger, and surprise that cannot endure. Yet even in its imperfection, there is a quiet beauty, a sense of life persisting against impossible odds, teaching the archivist that even fractured worlds have their own kind of poetry. A few steps beyond, the archivist finds timelines that vibrate faintly with soft golden echoes. These universes are remnants of choices that should never have collided but did. In one, a version of Ooos exists where Finn and Jake meet only briefly, their friendship flickering in sudden glimpses before fading entirely. In another, Ice King's crown was never lost, creating a realm in which he wielded magic with precision, but lived in isolation, his loneliness amplified by a clarity he could not share. Each echo pulses softly, as if the universe itself is breathing a quiet apology for the instability it has caused. The archivist allows themselves to linger among these shards, feeling the weight of broken possibilities pressed gently against their mind. It is not sorrow that fills them, nor regret, but a profound understanding of impermanence and the fragility of existence. Every universe, no matter how fractured, carries a lesson, a subtle truth hidden within the echoes of what could have been. Some teach resilience, some reveal caution, and some simply hum with the soft, mournful beauty of worlds that tried and could not hold together. In this chamber of broken universes, the archivist becomes acutely aware of the interplay between fragility and persistence. The echoes do not vanish entirely. They linger, whispering across space and time, leaving faint trails that may influence other timelines or inspire dreams yet to come. Each step the archivist takes through the chamber is deliberate, a slow dance with universes that balance on the edge of fading. They feel the pull of possibility and imperfection coexisting, a rhythm that is both haunting and comforting, like the echo of a half-remembered lullaby carried on the wind. The archivist pauses at the center of the chamber, where the largest shard floats suspended above a pedestal, trembling slightly as if alive. It is a universe that fractured spectacularly, a kaleidoscope of overlapping realities and conflicting events. Finn exists here, multiple times over, his identity splintered across dimensions. Jake stretches and folds upon itself, sometimes a friend, sometimes a reflection, sometimes a shadow of what might have been. Bubblegum's presence weaves through the fragments, her intellect diffused yet persistent, like threads of gold connecting shards across the instability. The archivist reaches out carefully, letting the shards' faint energy flow over their hands, feeling the soft hum of life and memory coexisting in tension. Each broken universe has its own echo, a distinct resonance that cannot be replicated, a gentle reminder of imperfection's beauty. The archivist listens, cataloging the subtle rhythms, feeling the stories pulse with quiet insistence. They understand that even in collapse, even in fracture, the universe whispers its truths, leaving echoes for those who care to hear, and teaching that nothing is ever truly lost, so long as someone remembers, so long as someone listens. The chamber stretches endlessly, filled with trembling light and soft resonance, and the archivist moves forward, letting the faint pulses of these broken universes guide them gently toward the next mysteries waiting in the cosmic library. The archivist steps carefully among the broken universes, their gaze following the subtle shimmer of fractured reality that stretches endlessly in every direction. The light here is never steady. It flickers softly, like sunlight passing through the canopy of a forest at dusk, painting everything in hues that are always shifting. Each universe hums with its own unique vibration, a quiet song that is barely perceptible, but profoundly alive. Some hum in high, delicate tones like wind chimes stirred by an invisible breeze, while others resonate with deep, slow pulses like the heartbeat of an ancient creature long forgotten. One shard draws the archivist closer, glowing with a faint green luminescence. In this world, magic does not simply bend, it fractures unpredictably, leaking into places it was never meant to reach. A river flows backward for a brief moment before resuming its normal course. Clouds fold in on themselves like soft fabric, revealing glimpses of strange landscapes beneath the sky. Finn exists here as a shadow of himself, moments of his life repeating in subtle variations. He runs toward a distant danger one instant, then appears seated quietly beneath a fractured tree in the next. Jake's body stretches and folds unpredictably, creating pathways that connect fragments of reality that would otherwise never meet. As the archivist lingers, they notice how the echoes of events cascade softly across the timeline. A battle half-fought in one fragment ripples into another, a single spell miscast creating gentle distortions that ripple through the shard. The Candy People appear intermittently, their forms flickering like light through a prism, sometimes corporeal, sometimes only impressions of what could have been. Even Ice King and Marceline appear differently here, their existences split across possibilities that cannot converge. The archivist can feel the tension in the air, a delicate balance that allows the shards to persist without collapsing entirely. Nearby, a cluster of smaller universes quivers faintly on low shelves, each no larger than a single book. These are the delicate echoes, the fragments that never fully formed but hum softly with unspent potential. One shows a version of Ooos where Finn never picked up a sword, yet he wanders the land, learning the quiet truths of courage without confrontation. Another depicts Marceline as a wanderer of sound, her music ephemeral and fleeting, forming shapes and colors that exist only for brief moments before fading. The archivist handles these shards with extreme care, their fingers brushing lightly along spines that tremble at the slightest touch, feeling the faint heartbeat of unrealized existence. As they move deeper into the chamber, the archivist comes across a particularly unusual shard, suspended above a pedestal of silver light. This universe is layered and multifaceted, like a gemstone with countless facets reflecting one another endlessly. Finn exists here in multiple iterations, each slightly different from the next, all echoing together across fractured dimensions. Jake stretches across worlds, sometimes solid, sometimes a fluid bridge, carrying laughter and memory from one layer to another. Bubblegum's presence is diffuse, her intellect woven delicately through each fragment, leaving traces of invention and care that ripple through the overlapping realities. The archivist leans in, letting the hum of this complex shard wash over them. They can feel the subtle tensions, the gentle friction between realities that almost collided but never fully aligned. Each echo is a quiet lesson, a soft reminder that even in fracture there is beauty, even in collapse there is rhythm. They take a slow breath, letting the vibrations settle into their mind, and for a moment they are not simply observing. They are listening, feeling, almost becoming part of the delicate, trembling life of these broken universes. In this chamber, the archivist reflects on the nature of imperfection. Broken universes do not merely end, they persist in echoes, leaving traces of what could have been. They teach that creation is not only about what succeeds, but about what endures in subtle, fragile ways. Each pulse, each shimmer of light, carries a quiet truth, that even a world that cannot hold itself together still matters. It leaves behind traces, impressions, echoes that ripple softly into the vast, unending expanse of possibility. The archivist moves forward, guided by the faint hums and flickers of these fragile shards. Some seem to call to them, gentle invitations to linger, to understand the nuances of worlds that danced briefly with reality before folding back into quiet. Others pulse softly into the distance, distant echoes that may never be fully grasped, yet still contribute to the gentle, endless rhythm of the chamber. Here, among the broken universes, the archivist feels the profound quiet of echoes waiting patiently. They breathe slowly, letting the soft resonance of fractured worlds settle around them, a gentle, comforting reminder that even in incompleteness, there is purpose. Each echo, each pulse, each shimmering shard of reality is a story, fragile and delicate, yet insistent in its presence. The chamber seems to stretch outward without end, filled with gentle vibrations and quiet light, guiding the archivist deeper into the mysteries of universes that almost were, leaving behind a soft, lingering sense of awe at the fragile, beautiful impermanence of everything. The archivist continues onward, moving carefully through the chamber, each step resonating faintly against the uneven floor as if acknowledging the fractured worlds around them. Here the light shifts in gentle waves, tracing the outlines of broken universes like a soft ripple across water. Each shard hums its own song, some faint and whispering, others pulsing like distant drums, a rhythm that is almost imperceptible but undeniably alive. The archivist pauses often, listening, letting each echo speak before moving on, knowing that even the smallest vibration carries the weight of unfulfilled possibility. A slender shard glows with a subtle, icy blue, and the archivist kneels to study it more closely. In this universe, Ice King exists not as a man transformed by his crown, but as Simon, quietly burdened by knowledge he cannot fully act upon. Magic exists here, but inconsistently, flowing like a stream with intermittent currents, forming shapes that are unpredictable yet mesmerizing. Snow drifts in patterns that repeat themselves endlessly, forming delicate crystalline sculptures that never melt. Finn is present, though he seems uncertain, caught between impulse and hesitation, moving through scenes that loop and overlap in soft, subtle variations. Jake's form is fluid here, sometimes extending like a bridge between fragments of reality, sometimes folding into itself as if caught between dimensions. Nearby, a cluster of shards pulses with muted amber light. These resonant fragments, as the archivist calls them, carry echoes of worlds that fractured not through chaos, but through subtle contradictions. In one, Marceline exists as a spirit of sound, her song shaping the landscape, yet fading before they are ever fully heard. In another, the Candy People build structures that shimmer briefly, then dissolve into scattered sweetness, leaving only faint memories of laughter and color. The archivist traces a finger along these spines, feeling the vibration beneath their touch, a soft rhythm that speaks of worlds trying to exist, despite forces that refuse them. Some universes are small and delicate, barely larger than a whisper. These tiny echoes are the faintest of pulses in the chamber, yet they hum persistently, insisting upon their existence. In one, Finn wanders a quiet ooh where no adventures take place, yet the land is alive with gentle magic, soft and undemanding, guiding him toward self-discovery in imperceptible ways. Jake follows with a slower, more thoughtful form, carrying calm and reflection rather than exuberance. Even the Ice King here is peaceful, a quiet figure wandering the landscape without conflict, unaware of the power that would have otherwise consumed him. These whispers are fragile, yet their persistence reveals a subtle truth, that even unrealized paths have significance, leaving soft traces in the tapestry of all possibility. As the archivist moves deeper into the chamber, they encounter a particularly intricate shard suspended in midair, illuminated by a faint golden light that refracts into delicate patterns across the walls. This universe is layered, multidimensional, and extraordinarily fragile. Finn appears here multiple times, each version slightly different, existing in overlapping realities that brush against one another like leaves in a gentle breeze. Jake stretches across these layers, sometimes connecting fragments, sometimes dissolving into reflections, a bridge between possibilities. Bubblegum exists diffusely, her knowledge and presence scattered across dimensions, a quiet intellect, leaving faint imprints on each fragment. The archivist studies the shard carefully, letting its subtle hum resonate through their fingertips, aware that even the smallest misstep could disturb the delicate equilibrium. The chamber itself seems to respond to their presence. Light bends slightly, shifting in subtle waves, and the air hums softly with anticipation. Some shards glow brighter when touched, while others dim, as if acknowledging the archivist's care. Here the archivist learns the language of broken universes, not in words, but in vibrations, pulses, and fleeting impressions. Every echo, every shimmering fragment, tells a story of possibility thwarted, of paths abandoned, and yet still alive in memory. Even collapse has its own poetry, a quiet beauty that only reveals itself to those patient enough to notice. Further down, the archivist encounters timelines that are fluid, liquid in nature, their edges rippling and shifting in constant motion. Time here is non-linear, moments looping and folding back upon themselves, creating patterns that are both mesmerizing and fragile. Finn appears in these worlds as multiple cells, moving across cycles that repeat with subtle variations. Jake stretches and bends, connecting moments that would otherwise never meet. Bubblegum's influence is faint but persistent, ideas scattered in fragments that form patterns only when observed with care. The archivist observes the delicate dance of events, letting their awareness expand to encompass the gentle chaos, understanding that these fragile loops are not failures but intricate expressions of potential. Some of the broken universes are layered atop one another, like pages in a book pressed too tightly, their energies interacting in subtle and unpredictable ways. A choice in one fragment echoes into another, altering events that were never meant to collide. A battle fought in one reality may leave a soft trace in another, creating brief flashes of hope, fear, or joy that ripple through these overlapping worlds. The archivist watches these interactions closely, noting how even the smallest echo can shape outcomes across multiple dimensions, and how imperfection itself can create a strange, quiet harmony. The archivist continues forward, moving among the floating shards, letting each hum guide their steps. Broken universes are not silent. They speak in rhythm, tone, and vibration. Each one has a memory to impart, a lesson in fragility, and a quiet persistence that refuses complete erasure. The archivist breathes slowly, allowing the soft resonance of these fractured realities to fill the space around them, a gentle symphony of existence that is both haunting and comforting, and guides them ever deeper into the heart of the chamber, where the echoes of broken worlds continue their patient, unhurried song. The archivist lingers in the heart of the chamber, surrounded by the quiet hum of broken universes. Each fragment glows faintly, pulsing with its own rhythm, and the air carries a subtle vibration that brushes against the skin like a soft, cooling wind. The light here is fractured, bending around corners, spilling into shadows, and refracting in ways that make the room feel alive with whispers of lives never fully realized. It is a gentle, mesmerizing chaos, a reminder that imperfection has its own quiet poetry. One of the larger shards floats just above a low pedestal, suspended by threads of light that seem as delicate as spider silk. This universe is fractured not violently, but gently, like a mirror cracked and held together by invisible bonds. Finn exists here in multiple forms simultaneously, his actions diverging at every subtle choice, folding back on themselves in endless possibilities. One version of him wanders forests that shift shape beneath his feet. Another sails rivers that move contrary to gravity, and yet another sits quietly under a sky that glimmers in hues impossible in any stable world. Jake stretches across these versions, his form fluid and reflective, connecting the fragments like a bridge made of memory and possibility. The archivist studies this shard closely, letting their fingertips hover just above its surface. They can feel the pulse of what might have been, the delicate tug of stories that tried to exist and failed, of moments that flickered briefly before vanishing. These echoes are not sorrowful nor triumphant. They exist quietly, carrying a soft resonance that is almost musical. Some hum with hope, others with longing, and a few with the gentle ache of worlds that could not hold themselves together. The archivist notes the subtle interplay, understanding that even in fracture there is meaning, and that every broken universe contributes to the vast, interwoven symphony of all existence. A smaller shard nearby pulses with golden light, warmer and softer than the others. In this universe, the Mushroom War never fully consumed Ooh, but the aftermath lingers like a faint memory. Forests twist and grow in unnatural patterns. Rivers wind unpredictably, and the sky shimmers with a faint, uneasy twilight. Finn moves through this world cautiously, his courage tempered by uncertainty, while Jake adapts fluidly, stretching and bending to bridge the instability. Bubblegum's influence is faint but persistent, a soft hum of intelligence and care that touches everything subtly, creating small ripples of stability within the fractured land. The archivist runs a gentle hand along the spine, feeling the soft warmth of the shard's pulse, a quiet acknowledgement of its existence. Some broken universes are almost invisible, delicate shards no larger than a thought. These whispering worlds hum softly, barely perceptible, yet insist upon their presence. One shows Marceline wandering a land without melody, her music forming and dissolving before it can be heard. Another depicts Ice King as a solitary figure, aware of his power but unable to control it, moving through a world that trembles at the edges of possibility. The archivist treats these shards with utmost care, understanding that fragility does not diminish significance, and that even the smallest echoes carry weight in the library of existence. The chamber stretches endlessly, a labyrinth of fragile, trembling light. The archivist moves carefully, guided by the subtle vibrations of these universes, letting their attention linger on each pulse and flicker. Some shards glow brighter when observed, others dim, as if acknowledging the archivist's presence. There is a rhythm here, a cadence formed by countless fractured possibilities vibrating together, a symphony of impermanence that can only be heard in stillness and quiet attention. Further along, a series of layered universes catches the archivist's gaze. These are interwoven shards, timelines that almost collided but never fully merged. In one layer, Finn runs boldly into adventure. In another, he pauses to reflect quietly on his choices. Jake stretches between realities, connecting fragments that should never meet, while Bubblegum's intellect ripples faintly through the layers, leaving subtle traces of influence. Even the Ice King and Marceline exist differently here, split into overlapping possibilities, each echo hinting at an alternate path never taken. The archivist kneels, studying the delicate threads of interconnection, feeling the hum of layered worlds vibrate gently beneath their touch. As they continue, the archivist reaches a small alcove where light pools in soft waves across the shelves. These are universes broken by subtle contradiction rather than chaos, where minor choices caused entire realities to collapse. Finn exists in moments of hesitation, Jake in forms that are tentative and shifting, and Bubblegum's influence diffuses across timelines, present but incomplete. Each shard here hums faintly, a soft vibration that carries the echo of almost successful lives and adventures left unrealized. The archivist listens carefully, letting the quiet resonance of these universes settle around them, feeling the gentle hum of possibility and imperfection intertwine. Some shards appear to float, untethered to any shelf, drifting gently through the chamber. These are the most delicate of all, fugitive worlds that resisted containment, carrying their fragile stories wherever the currents of reality allow. One shows Finn walking a landscape that folds upon itself endlessly, a forest with impossible geometry and rivers that defy natural laws. Jake stretches in unexpected directions, connecting fragments that might never meet. And the candy people flicker in and out of existence, forming patterns of movement and sound that are beautiful, ephemeral, and haunting. The archivist lets the shard drift gently through their hands, feeling its fragile energy ripple against their palms. Even in this chamber of broken universes, there is a strange comfort. The echoes of collapsed worlds are not lost entirely. They hum softly, leaving traces that influence distant timelines, suggesting the persistence of possibility even in imperfection. The archivist understands that brokenness is not an end, but a kind of quiet contribution to the tapestry of all worlds, a subtle reminder that every fragment, no matter how fragile, carries its own significance. The archivist steps back, letting their gaze sweep across the chamber. The shards shimmer softly, pulsing with the quiet rhythm of echoes and fractured magic. They feel the weight of these broken universes, not as sorrow, but as a gentle lesson in resilience and impermanence. Each universe, though fractured, still leaves a mark, a resonance, a whisper of life that refuses complete erasure. The chamber stretches endlessly, a symphony of fractured worlds vibrating in delicate, harmonious tension. The archivist pauses at the center of the chamber, resting their hands lightly on a pedestal holding the largest shard. This universe is a kaleidoscope of layered realities, multiple Finns and Jakes, moving across overlapping dimensions, worlds folding into themselves and brushing against impossible angles. The echoes are complex, intricate, and fragile, yet the archivist feels a profound sense of quiet beauty here. Even brokenness, they realize, can sing in its own soft, haunting lullaby, leaving traces of life, magic, and possibility that ripple gently into eternity. The archivist moves onward from the chamber of broken universes into a quieter, heavier section of the library. Here the air itself feels thick with stillness, carrying a weight that is almost tangible. This is the place of collapsed Ooos, realms that once teemed with life and magic, only to fold inward and fall silent. The shelves are lower, wider, and often partially crumbled, as though even the structure of the library struggles to contain the memory of what has ended. Light is dim here, filtered through fractured lenses that cast long, soft shadows, brushing against the remnants of adventures that once were. Walking carefully between the collapsed Ooos, the archivist senses the residue of history in every fragment. Some of these worlds shimmer faintly, held together by lingering strands of memory, while others are almost entirely dark, their presence detectable only by the soft vibration that hums faintly beneath the fingertips. In one shard, the Mushroom War's devastation stretches endlessly, leaving a land of broken forests, cracked rivers, and silent skies. Magic that once surged freely now seeps like fog into hollowed lands, forming faint, lingering patterns that refuse to vanish completely. Finn and Jake are barely perceptible, shadows of themselves wandering through ruins, their courage dimmed but not entirely gone. The archivist kneels beside a volume that seems almost crushed under the weight of its own silence. In this ooh, the Candy Kingdom exists as skeletal remains of candy architecture, sugar trees long melted into soft, drifting shapes. The inhabitants are gone, yet their essence lingers, captured in faint, glowing echoes that flicker when the archivist's hand passes near. Bubblegum appears only as fleeting traces of knowledge, faint blueprints and partially completed inventions suspended in time, whispering of the diligence and care that once shaped the land. Even Marceline's music persists, not as song, but as faint vibrations in the air, trembling softly over collapsed hills and empty streets. A collapsed ooh often contains more than loss. There are fragments that survive the silence, hidden threads of life that continue quietly despite catastrophe. One shard shows a river that refused to dry, flowing steadily through desolate forests, carrying reflections of stars and shards of memory to distant corners. Trees rooted in ruin sway gently, their branches holding whispers of forgotten laughter. Finn's courage persists in the smallest gestures, stepping over a fallen log, pausing to examine a delicate flower growing among rubble, a quiet heroism that exists despite the absence of battle. Jake stretches and folds into shapes that echo past adventures, carrying a sense of presence, even in a land stripped bare. Some of the collapsed ooze are strange, almost dreamlike, their landscapes folding and twisting in impossible ways. Mountains curl inward, rivers loop back on themselves, and the sky stretches endlessly in hues that shift softly with every glance. In one such world, Ice King exists, yet he is not a man of folly or loneliness. Instead, he wanders slowly, tending faint patches of ice that glimmer under a fractured sun. Marceline appears intermittently, her presence like a breeze that passes briefly through the land, leaving a subtle resonance in the silence. Even in decay, life persists in small, almost imperceptible ways. The archivist notes this carefully, recognizing that survival is not always grand or visible, but can exist quietly in whispers, echoes, and gentle pulses of memory. The deeper the archivist moves, the more evident it becomes that collapsed ooze have a rhythm of their own. The silence is not absolute. It is filled with faint vibrations of what once existed, soft currents of energy that ripple through the emptiness. Some of these echoes are comforting, carrying the warmth of memories preserved, while others hum with melancholy. The faint ache of worlds lost before their stories could be completed. Each collapsed ooh tells a tale, not of heroism or conquest, but of endurance, subtle and fragile, the quiet persistence of possibility even after the world itself has given way. One of the most remarkable volumes in this aisle shimmers with a gentle silver light. In this collapsed ooh, Finn and Jake wander an entirely barren landscape, yet the land responds to their presence. Tiny shoots of grass unfurl where they step. Faint sparkles of magic drift along their path, and distant echoes of song rise from the void. The archivist studies the shard carefully, sensing that even in apparent desolation, the essence of adventure remains preserved in the soft resonance of memory and will. Magic and courage endure here, quietly, patiently, leaving traces that refuse to fade entirely. Nearby, a collection of smaller shards pulses with muted gold. These contain ooze that collapsed less visibly, worlds that slowly folded inward without dramatic destruction. Forests became silent, rivers slowed, and towns emptied gradually as their magic dissipated. Finn still wanders these lands, but his presence is subtle, almost spectral, leaving traces of kindness and heroism in quiet, understated ways. Jake follows with elasticity, moving in forms that ripple through the remaining life, carrying laughter and companionship that never fully fades. Bubblegum exists faintly, her intellect lingering in half-completed experiments and fragile constructions that still hum softly with potential. The archivist pauses before a particularly fragile shard, its edges translucent and almost imperceptible. In this ooh, nothing seems alive at first glance, yet as they study it, tiny, beautiful details emerge. A single flower blooms in the shadow of collapsed candy towers, a river runs through cracked stone, and the faintest echo of song floats across the land. Finn's courage, Jake's companionship, and Bubblegum's ingenuity are all present, not in grand gestures, but in the quiet resilience of existence itself. These are the things that survive the silence, small, almost invisible traces of life, courage and magic that refuse to vanish entirely. In some collapsed ooze, the archivist finds worlds that have nearly dissolved into nothingness. Yet even here, faint currents of possibility linger. A branch bends slightly as if moved by a memory of wind. A sparkle of magic drifts lazily through the empty air. A fleeting echo of laughter can almost be heard. These subtle signs are the remnants of what once was, soft reminders that even the quietest whispers of life persist beyond destruction. The archivist moves carefully among these shards, letting the gentle pulse of survival guide their steps, understanding that even in silence, stories endure in the faintest forms. The chamber stretches endlessly, filled with quiet light and soft echoes, the archivist moving slowly and deliberately among the collapsed ooze. Every shard, every fragment, carries the subtle weight of history, a quiet resonance of life and magic that continues despite everything. In this place, silence is not emptiness. It is a gentle, patient force, carrying with it the traces of worlds that were, the remnants of stories that never fully unfolded, and the small, resilient sparks of what continues to survive. The archivist continues along the quiet aisles, each step deliberate, attuned to the gentle hum of remnants that survived the collapse. Light filters through fractured lenses above, soft and muted, casting faint, shifting patterns on the cracked floors and shelves. In these collapsed ooze, time itself feels slowed, stretched almost like honey, giving every lingering fragment a chance to exist, even if only barely. Here, survival is not loud or heroic. It is subtle, almost imperceptible, like the soft pulse of a hidden heartbeat beneath layers of stillness. One shard catches the archivist's attention with a pale violet glow. In this world, Ooh is fractured into small, disconnected islands, remnants of kingdoms that once thrived. Rivers no longer flow continuously, but pools of water shimmer in isolated patches, reflecting broken skies. Trees grow in peculiar patterns, their roots curling over ruins, carrying seeds of possibility even as their branches bend under weightless gravity. Finn wanders among these remnants, stepping cautiously, leaving faint impressions on the soft soil. Jake's form is elongated and flowing, connecting fragments of terrain in ways that are gentle and stabilizing, though fragile. Every movement is deliberate, a small act of continuity in a land that teeters on absence. Nearby, a collapsed candy kingdom shimmers with traces of sugar magic that lingers stubbornly in the air. The archivist observes faint, glowing traces of the candy people, their forms partially dissolved into patterns of light and color. Bubblegum's intellect is faintly present, embedded in floating scrolls and half-finished creations, glimmering softly like starlight trapped in glass. Even without their full presence, the ingenuity and care she once imparted to the kingdom remain, forming delicate networks of influence that continue to ripple through the runes. Marceline appears here as an ephemeral vibration, her music lingering in muted, incomplete chords echoing softly across the empty streets and broken towers. Some shards show forests and mountains that have partially collapsed, but continue to hum with faint life. Leaves float lazily in suspended air currents, rivers shimmer with residual energy, and creatures move slowly, barely perceptible, yet undeniably present. In these worlds, Finn and Jake act as subtle forces of continuity. Finn's courage manifests in quiet explorations, careful observations, and small acts of compassion. Jake's elasticity allows him to bridge gaps in terrain and magic, forming ephemeral connections that keep fragments of life intact. The archivist notes the way these remnants persist, understanding that survival often exists in the smallest, gentlest gestures, rather than dramatic heroics. Further along, the archivist discovers an unusually dark shard, almost devoid of light. It is a collapsed ooze where magic has drained almost entirely, leaving only faint traces of its former power. Yet even here, subtle signs of life endure. Tiny sparks of residual magic drift through the air, glowing briefly like fireflies. Finn exists as a muted echo, moving carefully, his presence shaping small details. A fallen stone shifted, a tiny sprout coaxed into growth. Jake follows, stretching and folding with precision, carrying the essence of continuity through the barren landscape. The archivist observes quietly, feeling the soft persistence of life that continues even when all else seems lost. Some fragments hold traces of civilization in miniature. Candy towers have crumbled into delicate piles, pathways are cracked and overgrown, yet faint traces of order remain. Streets hum with residual energy from footsteps never retraced. Objects hum faintly with memories of touch and intention. In these collapsed ooze, even the smallest remnants of structure, companionship, and magic carry significance. The archivist lingers among these fragments, tracing the faint vibrations with their fingertips, sensing the subtle persistence of history and narrative that refuses to vanish entirely. The archivist pauses at a shard with a soft amber glow. This ooze seems almost entirely quiet, yet subtle signs of memory and resilience remain. A single tree leans gracefully over a crumbling riverbank, leaves rustling faintly despite the absence of wind. Finn pauses under its shade, his breath gentle, eyes contemplative, a soft reminder that courage exists even in silence. Jake stretches across the fractured landscape, connecting islands of possibility, his presence like a gentle bridge in a world that threatens to unravel. Even without others, traces of friendship, loyalty, and wonder persist, delicate yet unyielding. As the archivist continues to move through the collapsed ooze, they notice that light and shadow interact differently in this chamber. Glimmers of past adventures filter through cracks and fractures, forming transient, floating scenes that appear for a heartbeat before dissolving again. A battle frozen mid-motion, a song half played, a conversation begun and left unfinished. These subtle echoes flicker and fade, carrying lessons, memory, and the quiet persistence of life. The archivist studies each one, understanding that what survives is often as important as what is lost, and that even silence holds shape and meaning in the continuum of existence. The chamber stretches further, filled with fragments that shimmer faintly, each carrying remnants of hope, courage, and quiet magic. Every shard is a lesson in resilience, a reminder that even collapsed ooze leave behind traces of what once was. Finn and Jake, Bubblegum, Marceline, and even Ice King exist in these fragments in ways that are subtle yet unmistakable, their essences woven into the fabric of the shards that continued to pulse softly. The archivist moves slowly, listening to the gentle hum of life that persists in shadowed, fractured lands, feeling a quiet reverence for the delicate persistence of existence against the weight of silence. The archivist walks further into the expanse of collapsed ooze, feeling the soft vibration of survival beneath the floor, as if the very fabric of these worlds carries a heartbeat of memory and persistence. Light filters through fractured ceilings, casting gentle patterns of shadow across the ruins of kingdoms and forests, illuminating the delicate persistence of what remains. Here, every fragment of land, every ripple of air, every trace of magic hums softly with the echoes of lives once lived, adventures once undertaken, and stories that never fully reached their conclusion. A large shard suspended in midair captures the archivist's attention. This ooh is a landscape of paradoxes, where destruction and life coexist in delicate balance. Candy towers, partially collapsed, lean into forests that have grown through them, intertwining sweetness and green in an almost painterly pattern. Rivers run in irregular loops, carrying reflections of the sky and glimpses of distant structures that flicker like half-remembered dreams. Finn walks carefully along the fragmented terrain, his courage quiet but palpable, leaving a trail of faint light in his footsteps that seems to coax life back into the fractured land. Jake stretches and folds over rivers and broken streets, bridging gaps with gentle, unyielding presence, a tether between fragments that might otherwise drift apart entirely. Nearby, another shard glows with a muted lavender hue, soft and melancholic. Here the Mushroom War's aftermath lingers like a sigh, shaping a world that breathes slowly through its ruins. Towns that were once vibrant are reduced to scattered remains, yet traces of their inhabitants persist in small, luminous patterns that drift across the land like gentle motes of dust in sunlight. Marceline passes through silently, her music faint and ethereal, vibrating across crumbling towers and hollow forests, leaving impressions of melody that linger for a heartbeat longer than they should. Ice King moves cautiously in another fragment, tending shards of ice that hold the faint echoes of lost magic. Even in apparent desolation, the remnants of personality, memory, and intent endure. The archivist observes the small details that survive collapse, realizing that even subtle acts can anchor a world against erasure. Tiny saplings push through cracks in stone, rivers glint with residual magic, and small creatures, almost invisible, traverse landscapes long abandoned. Finn bends to touch one of these sprouts, and the light of possibility flares softly in response. Jake forms delicate bridges of laughter and elasticity, supporting the fragile pulse of life in ways that are quiet but undeniably real. These acts are imperceptible in the grand scheme, yet they carry the essence of continuity, of worlds that refuse to vanish entirely. Some shards show entire ooze reduced to whispers of their former selves. In one, Candy Kingdom exists only as drifting sugar forms, suspended in midair and glowing softly with residual magic. Finn walks among them, tracing shapes with careful fingers, while Jake morphs to form gentle paths across the floating remnants. Bubblegum's presence is subtle but discernible, embedded in faint scrolls and fragile structures that hum with barely contained energy. Even in the absence of a fully formed world, life continues in quiet, tentative ways, persisting in echoes that ripple outward across space and time. Other collapsed ooze are marked by their strangeness. Mountains curl inward like spiraling shells, rivers twist and flow backward, and skies shimmer with impossible colors. shifting as if reflecting the fractured perceptions of the inhabitants who once existed there. Finn's courage here is measured, quiet, and reflective, expressed in observation and gentle action, rather than the grand heroics of fully realized worlds. Jake stretches between fragments of these surreal landscapes, connecting impossibilities in a way that preserves the smallest flickers of life. Even the faintest pulse of magic or intent becomes a thread of survival in a world on the edge of total silence. The archivist notes a particular shard where multiple collapsed ooze intersect, overlapping like delicate layers of paper pressed together. In these intersections, traces of previous inhabitants shimmer faintly, forming patterns of light and shadow that suggest stories and adventures never fully realized. Finn appears here as a muted echo, a guide through the fragmented landscapes, while Jake weaves between dimensions, carrying the residue of courage and companionship wherever it is needed. Marceline's presence is subtle, her music vibrating in imperfect waves that brush the edges of the ruins, creating moments of ephemeral beauty. These layered intersections reveal that even collapse does not mean isolation. Worlds continue to interact, however faintly, leaving behind traces of influence that ripple outward. Small, nearly invisible shards float among the larger fragments, carrying whispered survival in the most delicate forms. One shows a forest where leaves shimmer faintly despite the absence of wind. Another depicts a river that continues to flow, carrying reflections of stars long extinguished. Finn moves gently through these microcosms, leaving light traces with each step, while Jake stretches across impossible gaps, ensuring that every fragment remains connected to the rhythm of life. Bubblegum's subtle influence appears in almost imperceptible currents, holding together pieces of magic, structure, and memory, allowing them to persist in fragile harmony. The archivist pauses in the center of the chamber, letting the soft, pervasive hum of collapsed ooze wash over them. Each fragment, each shard, vibrates with quiet resilience, telling stories of survival that do not rely on grandeur or triumph. The courage, ingenuity, and companionship of ooze inhabitants persist in small, almost imperceptible ways, echoing gently across the void left by collapse. Even in silence there is life. Even in destruction, there is a pulse that refuses to be extinguished. The archivists breathe slowly, attuning themselves to the subtle rhythm, understanding that these remnants are not simply echoes of what was. They are the quiet foundations upon which possibility endures. The chamber stretches endlessly, filled with shards that shimmer faintly in the soft, fractured light. Collapsed ooze hum with the persistence of life, memory, and magic, their faint pulses echoing gently into the greater library. The archivist moves carefully through the aisles, feeling the quiet continuity of existence that survives even the most profound silence. Here, amidst the ruins of worlds that fell, they recognize a pattern, that survival is often subtle, perseverance gentle, and the remnants of life and adventure leave traces that ripple softly through the corridors of possibility. The archivist allows themselves to pause in the center of the chamber, letting the soft vibrations of collapsed ooze resonate fully around them. The air feels alive with quiet persistence, each shard of reality pulsing faintly as though reminding the world that even in collapse, there is a kind of enduring memory. The light here bends and refracts through the fractured ceiling in delicate, undulating patterns, casting gentle glows upon ruins of kingdoms, forests, and rivers that no longer flow in straight lines. Each glimmer of existence, no matter how faint, hums softly with the echoes of life, and the archivist breathes in the rhythm, attuning to the subtle language of survival. In one expansive shard, the ruins of the Candy Kingdom, stretch across a vast, fractured landscape. Candy towers lean precariously over cracked streets, and fragments of confectionery architecture float in midair, suspended by lingering magic. Finn walks among the remnants, his movements deliberate, each step carrying faint traces of hope and courage that ripple into the surrounding. Jake stretches across gaps in the crumbled landscape, his body forming bridges of connection between shards of magic and memory. Bubblegum exists here as soft pulses of intellect, her inventions and plans half completed, but still functioning in miniature, guiding small pieces of life to persist where they might otherwise fade. Marceline drifts through the remnants, her music faint but insistent, vibrating across collapsed buildings and forests, creating subtle currents of emotion that cling to the land. The archivist kneels beside a particularly delicate shard, one of the smallest in the chamber, glowing softly like a distant star. Here the mushroom war never truly ended, but the after effects lingered like a breath held too long. Forests lean into one another in impossible configurations. Rivers twist over themselves, and the sky flickers with hues that seem borrowed from a dream. Finn exists here as a quiet, reflective figure, moving slowly through the landscape, cautious but persistent. Jake morphs into forms that connect broken terrain and drifting fragments, stretching to bridge the impossibilities of space and time. Even in this minimal, nearly silent world, the essence of friendship, courage, and curiosity survives in delicate patterns that shimmer faintly across the land. Oh, some collapsed Ooos are dreamlike and surreal, landscapes folded upon themselves, bending logic and expectation. Mountains spiral like seashells, rivers float above fractured valleys, and skies ripple with impossible light. In these shards, survival is subtle and often invisible to the untrained eye. Finn moves carefully, leaving behind traces of courage and careful observation, while Jake forms bridges and connections where none seem possible. Bubblegum's intellect persists as delicate currents, guiding fragments of magic and structure to remain coherent even as the world threatens to dissolve. Marceline's music flows faintly, threading through fractured landscapes, leaving resonance of sound that persists like fragile memory. The archivist notices that light interacts differently with each shard, shifting in ways that reveal subtle traces of life, memory, and magic. Some fragments glow brighter in the presence of observation, others dim in recognition of absence, creating a dynamic interplay of illumination and shadow. Tiny creatures, almost imperceptible, scuttle along the edges of ruins. Leaves tremble faintly despite the still air. Rivers ripple softly, carrying reflections of skies that no longer exist in their original form. Even in desolation, the archivist realizes, life manifests in subtle, persistent ways, leaving impressions that refuse to vanish entirely. A particularly expansive shard hums with golden light, showing a collapsed Ooh that was once rich with civilization. Towns and kingdoms have fallen, rivers dried to trickles, and forests reduced to skeletal remains. Yet there is movement. Finn walks through these ruins, his presence stirring gentle sparks of life. Jake stretches across gaps, carrying laughter and warmth where the land has gone cold. Bubblegum's influence persists faintly, visible in softly glowing fragments of knowledge, carefully maintained artifacts, and inventions that hum quietly with residual magic. Marceline drifts through the landscape, her music echoing like a faint breeze, binding fragmented memories together in ephemeral harmony. Even in the smallest shards, survival manifests. A single flower blooms among the rubble, glowing softly under fractured sunlight. A stone shifts as if guided by unseen hands. A patch of forest leans toward a river, tracing patterns of existence that continue to persist despite collapse. Finn pauses to observe each subtle miracle, recognizing the quiet courage it takes to endure in silence. Jake bends and stretches in ways that honor the rhythm of the land, forming connections that might otherwise never exist. Bubblegum's faint pulses of intellect ensure that even small structures hold together, carrying knowledge and magic through the ruins. Marceline's song threads everything with delicate resonance, stitching fragments together through the power of memory and emotion. The archivist steps back, letting their gaze sweep across the chamber. Collapsed ooze stretch endlessly in every direction, each shard vibrating with its own gentle pulse, its own quiet survival. They feel the weight of countless stories, adventures, and lives, not as sorrow, but as a profound lesson in persistence. Even in silence there is music. Even in destruction there is rhythm. Even in absence there are traces of what once was, quietly shaping what may still be. At the chamber's center, a shard floats above a pedestal, larger and more complex than the rest. It is a landscape of folded realities, where multiple collapsed ooze converge, creating subtle interactions and overlays. Finn appears here in several forms, each slightly different, stepping lightly across the fractured land. Jake stretches across dimensions, connecting them with a soft, resilient energy. Bubblegum's influence threads through every corner, her intelligence diffused yet persistent, guiding fragments of magic, memory, and life. Marceline's faint music binds the whole shard together, creating a fragile harmony that holds even as the world threatens to fold entirely. The archivist lets their hands hover over the shard, feeling the soft pulse of life that remains. These collapsed ooze, though broken, are not empty. They carry traces of courage, friendship, magic, and ingenuity, surviving in subtle, quiet ways that require careful attention to perceive. Every flicker of light, every soft vibration, every whisper of wind or song is evidence of endurance, of worlds refusing to vanish completely. The archivist breathes slowly, absorbing the quiet lesson that even collapse carries within it the seeds of persistence, the faint spark of possibility, and the enduring pulse of what survives the silence. The archivist steps carefully into a new chamber, one suffused with a pale, gentle light that seems to emanate from the very air. The scent here is faintly of parchment and smoke, of ink dried centuries ago, and the quiet hum of words never fully spoken. This is the Isle of Half-Written Prophecies, a corridor of possibility suspended between what was foretold and what never came to pass. Shelves stretch high and wide, some leaning precariously under the weight of unfinished manuscripts, others opening onto empty spaces where scribes once worked, but left no trace. The room feels alive, humming softly with the quiet energy of words left incomplete, of futures suspended in uncertainty. The prophecies themselves vary greatly. Some are inscribed on delicate parchment, ink still slightly luminous, curling gently at the edges as though whispering their secrets. Others are etched into fragile crystal tablets, faintly glowing with the residue of magic, their inscriptions flickering in and out like memory itself. In many cases, the scribes who wrote them abandoned their work mid-sentence, leaving worlds poised on the edge of revelation, dangling threads of fate that never fully resolved. The archivist senses the subtle tension in the air, the pull of unfinished narratives yearning to be completed, even as time itself seems to have slowed to accommodate their incompleteness. The first manuscript the archivist examines is small, bound in faded blue leather, its edges worn smooth by long centuries. The ink is delicate, almost liquid, forming intricate letters that curl like smoke in the air. The prophecy begins by describing a great convergence, where heroes and villains would meet across time, weaving together the fates of countless worlds. Finn is mentioned, a figure of courage yet to fully awaken, and Jake stretches across possibilities that flicker in and out of existence. But the prophecy halts mid-line, leaving a blank space that seems to pulse softly, as though the universe itself is waiting to decide the next words. The archivist leans in, running fingers lightly over the page, feeling the subtle vibration of potential unfulfilled. Nearby, a series of crystal tablets glow faintly in the dim light. Each one carries part of a prophecy that stretches across multiple realities, describing events both cosmic and intimate. One tablet speaks of Ooos surviving a calamity that should have ended all magic, but the writing stops abruptly, leaving a swirl of faint energy in the void where words should have been. Another records a vision of Marceline discovering a lost melody, a song capable of reshaping worlds, yet the final notes are missing, suspended in shimmering emptiness. The archivist observes carefully, understanding that these half-written prophecies are not merely incomplete. They are alive, vibrating with the tension between what is known and what remains possible. Some prophecies are more abstract, written in forms that defy conventional language. Symbols float along the pages, shifting and reforming as though alive, hinting at secrets the scribe never fully grasped. One scroll contains patterns that suggest the rise and fall of kingdoms across multiple Ooos, yet the final sequences are missing, leaving arcs of time dangling in delicate suspension. Another manuscript hums with a faint golden glow, promising knowledge of hidden magic and future triumphs, but fades into nothing before the revelations can be articulated. The archivist senses that each abandoned scribe left behind more than mere words. They left intention, desire, and the quiet burden of knowing that some truths may never be fully captured. The room is dotted with small alcoves where scribes once sat writing by faint, magical light. Each alcove holds remnants of ink, quills frozen mid-stroke, and chairs that seem to remember the touch of their occupants. Some scribes abandoned their work in fear of what might come to pass, others in weariness, overwhelmed by the enormity of foresight. A single unfinished book rests atop a pedestal, describing a version of Ooh where Finn and Jake face an enemy unknown, a threat neither magic nor courage can fully contain. The words trail off into an empty margin, as if the scribe themselves had reached the limits of understanding, unable to predict the outcome of a story that belongs simultaneously to every world and none. The archivist pauses before a large scroll, its parchment almost translucent, curling like smoke in the gentle air. The prophecy it contains is fragmentary, describing a convergence of timelines where heroes and villains intersect, where choices ripple across dimensions, and where courage and friendship are tested against forces that exist beyond comprehension. Finn and Jake are present, their roles hinted at through incomplete verbs and half-formed sentences. Bubblegum's intelligence is suggested in faint annotations along the margins, while Marceline's presence is indicated by delicate musical symbols, left unfinished, as though the scribe could not capture the essence of sound and words. The final lines are absent, leaving the reader with a sense of suspended anticipation. A story that exists simultaneously in memory, possibility, and longing. Other prophecies are not tied to specific characters, but to abstract truths of existence. One describes a cycle of creation and collapse, where worlds fold inward and outward. Magic burns and fades, and life continues in forms both visible and imperceptible. The sentences stop mid-thought, leaving gaps that ripple softly through the chamber, each blank space vibrating with the possibility of countless endings. Another manuscript speaks of courage as a force beyond comprehension, tracing the influence of heroism across fragments of Ooos that never fully merged, only to leave the lines incomplete, as if even the scribe understood that some patterns cannot be fully recorded without altering the worlds themselves. The archivist walks slowly down the aisle, letting their gaze linger on each unfinished text. The quiet energy here is gentle but insistent, a reminder that prophecy is never solely about foretelling. It is about potential, about the tension between what is and what might be. The scribes who abandoned their work did not fail. They recognized the delicate balance between knowledge and impossibility, leaving behind fragments that continued to resonate across time and space. Finn and Jake Bubblegum, Marceline and Ice King appear repeatedly in these shards, their stories hinted at, their actions partially recorded, all suspended in the gentle hum of unfinished possibility. Some prophecies glow softly with residual magic, their words shifting faintly when observed. Symbols rearrange themselves, letters stretch and curl, and images form briefly before dissolving. One prophecy hints at a threat that would span infinite versions of Ooos, but the final judgment is absent, leaving the air vibrating with unanswered questions. Another speaks of a melody capable of restoring fractured realities, yet the notes are scattered, incomplete, existing as a delicate, invisible thread that threads through multiple shards. The archivist studies these carefully, aware that each fragment is alive in its own subtle way, carrying intention, energy, and the quiet weight of stories left incomplete. In the middle of the chamber, a pedestal holds a massive tome, its cover etched with patterns that shift faintly in response to observation. The book is open to a page of prophecy describing Finn and Jake encountering a realm beyond time, a world that folds and unfolds upon itself, where choices reverberate across dimensions. The lines stop mid-paragraph, leaving a space that hums softly with unspoken possibilities. Jake stretches across the gaps in the narrative, forming connections that almost stabilize the story, while Finn's courage lingers on the page, faint but present. Bubblegum's intellect threads through marginalia, Marceline's music hums faintly, and even Ice King's erratic influence flickers across the unfinished letters. The archivist leans in, tracing the gentle pulse of potential, aware that the story is alive, breathing quietly in the spaces between words. The aisle stretches endlessly, filled with half-written prophecies and abandoned scribes. Some manuscripts float suspended in midair, others rest delicately on shelves, their edges curling and trembling. The archivist moves slowly, attuned to the vibrations of unfinished stories, feeling the quiet power of intention left behind. Each prophecy, though incomplete, resonates with courage, curiosity, magic, and the delicate weight of possibility. The scribes may have abandoned their work, but the prophecies themselves continue to hum softly, whispering of worlds yet to be shaped, of adventures never fully realized, and of the quiet endurance of hope, even in fragments. The archivist lingers in the aisle, letting their senses absorb the soft resonance of unfinished prophecies. Light filters gently through high, cracked windows, scattering across parchment and crystal tablets in irregular patterns, illuminating phrases that pulse faintly with residual energy. Some manuscripts seem almost aware of being observed, their letters curling and shifting ever so slightly, as if eager to communicate what they cannot fully express. The chamber hums with a subtle vibration, the sound of countless possibilities brushing against one another in quiet harmony. One particularly delicate scroll rests upon a pedestal, its edges frayed and curling like the wings of a butterfly. The prophecy it contains describes a moment when Ooos will face a choice not dictated by heroism or villainy, but by understanding. Finn is hinted at in half-formed sentences, standing at the threshold of a decision that could ripple across multiple realities. Jake appears in fleeting glimpses, his form stretching between shards of narrative, connecting actions and outcomes that otherwise might remain disconnected. Bubblegum's influence is suggested by faint annotations, her intellect leaving traces of insight that guide the reader's perception. Marceline's presence is suggested only through shifting musical symbols, vibrating softly in the margins, an echo of sound that lingers just long enough to be felt but not fully heard. Nearby, a cluster of crystal tablets vibrates faintly in a coordinated rhythm. Each carries a fragment of prophecy describing events across fractured Ooos, instances of courage, friendship, and magic that should have converged but never fully did. The tablets are incomplete, their messages fractured, yet the archivist senses the subtle connections that persist between them. One fragment describes a catastrophe that could have erased entire kingdoms, while another hints at an intervention that might have prevented it. The lines stop abruptly, leaving a vacuum that thrums softly with unrealized potential. The archivist runs fingers lightly over the glowing surface, feeling the faint pulse of intention, of stories held in suspension. Some manuscripts are even more abstract, written in languages that are part word, part symbol, part music. One scroll forms an intricate spiral, with letters and notes flowing outward from a central point, fading as they reach the edges. It hints at a confluence of magic and time, of choices that echo across multiple dimensions of Ooh. Finn and Jake are implied in the movements of the symbols, their roles present as suggestion rather than declaration. Bubblegum's influence flickers in the form of annotations that appear and disappear. Marceline's song threads through the spiral like a delicate filament, and even Ice King's erratic presence distorts the flow of energy in subtle ways. The prophecy halts mid-spiral, leaving the remaining space vibrating softly, a liminal space of what could be. The archivist moves deeper into the chamber, passing alcoves where scribes once labored in quiet solitude. Quills rest on desks, frozen mid-stroke, and ink pots sit untouched for centuries. Some scribes abandon their work out of fear, others out of exhaustion or uncertainty, and still others simply because they recognize the futility of capturing the fullness of possibility. A massive tome lies open in one alcove, its pages half filled with a story of Ooh threatened by an invisible force that bends reality itself. Finn's courage and Jake's loyalty are sketched lightly, like tentative brushstrokes on a vast canvas, while Bubblegum's intellect and Marceline's music ripple faintly across the margins. The final lines dissolve into emptiness, leaving a soft vibration of stories untold. In certain corners of the chamber, prophecies hover as if floating on invisible currents. Words and symbols drift slowly through the air, forming partial sentences and fragmented visions. One prophecy depicts a world where Finn and Jake face an adversary who embodies all the fears and doubts of Ooh, yet the narrative stops abruptly before any resolution can occur. Another describes the rise of a hidden kingdom, a place shaped by courage and collaboration. But the final details remain suspended, unresolved. The archivist leans closer to these fragments, tracing the faint energy of intention that persists despite the absence of conclusion. Some prophecies seem almost playful in their incompleteness, hinting at whimsical possibilities that never solidified. A page describes a festival where the Candy People gathered to celebrate the return of a lost star, but the narrative dissolves before the celebration begins. Another hints at a friendship rekindled in the aftermath of a great calamity, yet the final moments remain unwritten, leaving only the tender echo of connection. The archivist feels the gentle pulse of these suspended stories, recognizing that even in incompletion there is meaning. and that the quiet act of intention can shape reality subtly across space and time. Other manuscripts vibrate with a soft golden light, suggesting urgency or importance. One details a future where Ooos must confront an anomaly capable of unweaving magic itself. Finn and Jake are present, their courage tested, in ways that are hinted at but never fully described. Bubblegum's intellect threads through the margins like a stabilizing force, while Marceline's music hums faintly in the empty spaces between words. The final lines are absent, leaving a field of possibility that stretches outward like a quiet, unspoken song. The archivist senses that these half-written prophecies are not failures, but invitations, delicate openings in the tapestry of time that allow potential to persist quietly, waiting for realization. The archivist steps back and surveys the chamber, feeling the gentle hum of hundreds of unfinished stories. Light dances across half-written texts and floating fragments, illuminating faint traces of courage, friendship, magic, and memory. The abandoned scribes, though long gone, left behind intention, a quiet presence that resonates in every incomplete line. Finn, Jake, Bubblegum, Marceline, and Ice King appear repeatedly in these fragments, their stories suspended between completion and absence, hinting at futures both fragile and enduring. The archivist breathes slowly, attuning to the quiet rhythm of these half-written prophecies, aware that in incompletion there is life, and in silence there is potential. The archivist moves slowly through the chamber, allowing their gaze to linger on each fragile manuscript, each hovering scroll, and every glowing crystal tablet. The soft light around them seems to pulse gently with the resonance of unfinished words, as if the chamber itself breathes with the weight of possibility. Here the absence of conclusion is not emptiness, it is potential, a quiet, hovering promise that the story may one day find its form, though it has not yet. Finn and Jake, Bubblegum, Marceline, and even Ice King drift in and out of these half-written prophecies, their actions suggested in sweeping, tentative lines, never fully resolved, but always present, shaping the silent energy of the room. A particularly large scroll unfurls along a golden pedestal, suspended by invisible threads of magic. Its edges tremble gently, catching the dim light like the surface of a still pond stirred by a faint breeze. The prophecy it contains speaks of a confluence of magic and courage, a moment where multiple Ooos might intersect, their fates brushing against one another like soft waves. Finn is hinted at in tentative verbs moving across fractured timelines, his courage palpable even in half-formed sentences. Jake stretches across dimensions, bridging the gaps left by incomplete narrative, carrying subtle hints of laughter and warmth. Bubblegum's intellect weaves softly through marginalia, her presence suggesting the careful scaffolding of potential outcomes. Marceline's music, faint and ephemeral, threads through the text, vibrating with quiet resonance that lingers long after the eye moves on. Other prophecies are more fragmented, almost abstract, composed of half-formed shapes and symbols rather than words. One scroll spirals into itself, its letters curling in impossible directions, tracing patterns that hint at great triumphs and disasters yet to be realized. Finn and Jake's actions are implied through the flow of symbols, with every curve suggesting a choice or movement across fractured worlds. Bubblegum's influence appears as fleeting sparks along the margins, delicate indicators of guidance, while Marceline's music is suggested by undulating lines vibrating softly across the parchment. Ice King appears as scattered, unpredictable shapes, leaving traces of chaos and unintended consequence. The prophecy halts mid-spiral, leaving the remaining space vibrating with unspoken potential, a quiet invitation for the imagination to fill what remains unwritten. The archivist pauses before a cluster of small, translucent scrolls that hover in midair, their edges glowing faintly like embers. Each contains a brief, incomplete vision of Ooh, a fleeting glimpse into futures that might have been. One describes a friendship rekindled between unlikely allies, yet the sentences dissolve before the moment can fully blossom. Another hints at a great threat arising from beyond known timelines, yet its resolution is absent, leaving only a subtle vibration in the air, a warning unfulfilled. The archivist feels the quiet energy of these fragments, recognizing that the absence of completion carries as much weight as the words themselves, preserving space for possibility and reflection. Some of the most intriguing prophecies are woven into crystal tablets, each one inscribed with patterns that pulse faintly with residual magic. One tablet hums with golden light, describing a convergence where magic itself might unravel and reform, testing courage, friendship, and ingenuity in delicate ways. Finn and Jake appear in fleeting glimpses, their actions suggested but never finalized, while Bubblegum's intellect threads through the lines like a stabilizing force, Marceline's music providing the rhythm to what remains unspoken. Ice King's chaotic influence flickers along the edges of the tablet, disrupting patterns just enough to leave room for uncertainty. The prophecy stops mid-sentence, leaving a delicate hum of tension, a subtle vibration that continues to resonate across the chamber. Walking down the aisle, the archivist notices a particularly fragile manuscript that seems almost alive. Its pages flutter faintly, responding to their presence, revealing partial visions of Oo's past and future simultaneously. Finn is present here as a quiet observer, his courage reflected in careful, deliberate movements, while Jake forms connections between fragments of narrative, weaving threads of continuity through gaps in the story. Bubblegum's influence manifests in faint notations along the margins. Marceline's music vibrates softly, like a gentle breeze, and Ice King's chaotic energy flickers faintly, a reminder that even unfinished narratives contain complexity and consequence. The lines trail off mid-thought, yet the sense of unfolding possibility remains tangible, alive in the quiet resonance of the room. The archivist steps back to survey the aisle, observing hundreds of half-written prophecies, suspended between parchment, crystal, and air itself. Each carries the residue of intention, the subtle hum of stories left incomplete, the gentle energy of potential pause mid-creation. Some are whimsical, hinting at festivals, friendships, or playful adventures that never fully materialize. Others are weighty, describing threats, cosmic trials, and moments of quiet heroism left unfinished. Finn, Jake, Bubblegum, Marceline, and Ice King weave through these prophecies in gentle echoes, their actions suggested, their presence lingering, their stories partially told, yet vibrating softly with meaning. A particularly radiant tome rests in the center of the chamber, its cover etched with shifting patterns that glow faintly in response to observation. The pages within are half-filled with prophecies describing a cataclysm that could unfold across multiple Ooos. Finn is present in delicate sketches of movement, his courage implied in careful notations. Jake stretches across fractured timelines, bridging gaps of possibility and connection. Bubblegum's intellect hums faintly, threading through marginalia that almost complete the narrative, while Marceline's music resonates across the pages, tying fragments together in subtle harmony. The final lines are absent, leaving a gap vibrating with potential, a soft invitation for possibility to continue its quiet course. The archivist moves slowly through the chamber, fingers hovering over delicate manuscripts, aware that each unfinished prophecy carries not failure, but presence. The abandoned scribes left more than words. They left intention, energy, and subtle guidance. Their efforts preserving space for the continuation of stories in ways that may yet influence the unfolding of Ooos' endless adventures. The room hums gently with the quiet energy of half-written worlds echoing softly in every corner, reminding the archivist that even in incompletion there is life, in absence there is presence, and in the silent intention of the scribes, the heartbeat of possibility. The archivist lingers in the center of the chamber, letting the gentle hum of half-written prophecies settle around them. Each fragment of parchment, each glowing crystal tablet, each floating scroll carries the subtle weight of intention. The abandoned scribes may have left their work unfinished, yet the energy embedded in every line, every symbol, every pause continues to resonate, forming a quiet lattice of possibility that stretches across time, space, and multiple Ooos. Finn and Jake, Bubblegum, Marceline, and even Ice King exist here in ghostly echoes, their stories suggested rather than fully told, but their presence gives the unfinished words life, allowing them to pulse softly in the air. One particularly delicate scroll rests atop a pedestal carved from faintly glowing stone. Its edges flutter lightly as if breathing, the unfinished prophecy within hinting at a great reckoning that might span multiple realities. Finn's courage appears in half-formed actions, careful and reflective, a quiet heroism that ripples outward without needing grand gestures. Jake stretches across fractured words, connecting threads of possibility with his fluid form, carrying faint traces of laughter and loyalty wherever he extends. Bubblegum's influence is subtle, appearing in delicate marginalia and soft currents of residual intellect, guiding the incomplete narrative with gentle precision. Marceline's music hums faintly beneath the text, tying together fragments of story through vibrations too soft to fully hear, yet impossible to ignore. Nearby, a cluster of crystal tablets pulses with muted golden light, each containing fragments of prophecies that ripple across space and time. One describes a calamity capable of unweaving magic itself, yet the narrative stops mid-sentence, leaving a quiet gap that vibrates with latent energy. Another hints at a convergence of Ooos, where choices made in one realm could subtly influence outcomes in another. But the resolution remains unwritten, suspended delicately in possibility. The archivist moves slowly, fingertips brushing the surfaces, feeling the quiet pulse of intention left behind by scribes who recognized the limits of foresight. Each fragment hums with potential, an invisible thread connecting past, present, and future, waiting patiently to be awakened. Some prophecies are abstract, written in symbols that shift and twist in subtle patterns. One scroll spirals like a galaxy, the letters forming arcs and curves that suggest movement, choice, and consequence. Finn and Jake's actions are hinted at in the flow of the symbols, their courage and companionship implied in the very shape of the writing. Bubblegum's annotations flicker along the margins. Marceline's music vibrates softly through undulating lines, and Ice King's chaotic influence distorts the patterns in small, unpredictable ways. The spiral halts before its center is reached, leaving the remaining space trembling with unspoken potential. The archivist senses that even these abstract fragments carry meaning, their incomplete form inviting participation from the imagination of the observer. Other manuscripts hover gently in midair, tethered by unseen magic. Each fragment contains partial visions of Ooos, snapshots of worlds poised on the edge of transformation. In one, Finn is depicted standing before a fissure in time, a choice unmade yet profoundly consequential. Jake stretches across the void, carrying the possibility of connection and continuity. Bubblegum's intellect lingers in faint notes along the edges. Marceline's song weaves through the air, and Ice King appears as scattered shapes, reminders of chaos and unpredictability. The narrative stops abruptly, leaving an empty space that vibrates softly, a liminal zone where stories wait patiently for their completion. The archivist steps into a small alcove where a massive tome rests, his pages curling slightly with age and magic. The prophecy within speaks of the intersection of courage, friendship, and magic across fragmented ooze, yet it too halts midline, leaving a soft hum of unrealized potential. Finn's movements are suggested rather than detailed, his courage quiet and reflective. Jake forms bridges across the gaps, subtle but indispensable, connecting possibilities that might otherwise remain disconnected. Bubblegum's influence threads delicately through the narrative. Marceline's music resonates faintly, and Ice King's chaos flickers along the edges, introducing small disruptions that preserve the unpredictability of choice. Some of the smaller prophecies are whimsical, playful in their incompletion. A half-finished scroll describes a festival in the Candy Kingdom, where candy citizens celebrate a star that never fully returned, leaving the joy incomplete yet faintly shimmering in the margins. Another hints at a reconciliation between characters separated by time and circumstance, the moment unresolved, yet its potential radiates softly across the chamber. The archivist notes these gently, understanding that even unfinished joy, wonder, and curiosity carry significance, preserving delicate threads of possibility across fractured realities. In one section of the aisle, a series of hovering crystal shards capture the light, each one containing fragments of fate. One shard suggests a world where Finn and Jake must face a cosmic threat that bends reality itself, yet the final outcome remains unwritten. Bubblegum's intellect hums faintly, Marceline's music ripples through the shard, and Ice King's chaotic tendencies twist the remaining energy subtly. The shards vibrate softly, a gentle reminder that even in incompletion, intention persists. The archivist observes closely, tracing the invisible threads that connect fragments across space and time, feeling the quiet resonance of stories suspended in gentle anticipation. At the far end of the chamber, a grand manuscript stretches across a pedestal, its pages filled with shifting, half-written prophecies. Each fragment pulses with latent magic, a delicate, unspoken language of possibility. Finn, Jake, Bubblegum, Marceline, and Ice King appear throughout the manuscript in fleeting glimpses, their presence suggested rather than fully rendered, leaving room for imagination and interpretation. The archivists breathe slowly, attuned to the subtle hum of potential, aware that each incomplete story carries its own quiet form of life, its own gentle insistence that existence, courage, and friendship endure even in absence. The chamber stretches endlessly, filled with hovering scrolls, half-written prophecies, and manuscripts vibrating softly with latent energy. The scribes who abandoned their work centuries ago left behind intention, thought, and quiet guidance. The archivist moves slowly through the aisle, allowing the hum of possibility to wash over them, aware that even unfinished narratives shape the world in subtle ways. Here in the silence of abandoned stories there is life. Here in the gentle tension of incompletion there is magic. And here in the quiet pulse of half-written prophecies, the essence of Oo endures, waiting patiently for the stories yet to be told. The archivist steps into a new corridor, one dimly lit by flickering iridescent light that seems to pulse with an internal rhythm. The air here carries the faint tang of ozone and smoke, of ink burned in fleeting flashes, and of a magic that resists containment. This is the Isle of Corrupted Scrolls, a place where spells have grown wild, rebellious, and sometimes dangerous. The parchment trembles softly beneath invisible currents, and the letters writhe as though aware of observation, twisting into shapes that hint at words but refuse full comprehension. Every scroll hums with subtle resistance, a quiet insistence that the magic contained within will not be tamed easily, and the archivist feels the delicate tension of power that is both alive and unpredictable. Some scrolls hang suspended in the air, their edges singed or curling unnaturally, glowing faintly with residual energy. The archivist approaches one carefully, its letters shifting before their eyes, forming sentences that almost make sense, only to dissolve into abstract symbols that seem to argue with the observer. This scroll contains an incantation for summoning protective barriers, yet the words contort and overlap, creating patterns that almost breathe, resisting clarity while radiating latent potency. Finn appears faintly within the ripple of light, his movements suggested as if he is walking along the shifting text, trying to follow meaning where the language itself refuses to yield. Jake stretches to bridge fragments of letters, attempting to stabilize the chaos, his body a gentle conduit connecting patterns that threaten to dissolve. Other scrolls are more insidious. They hum softly with corrupted intent, the letters forming arcs that twist unpredictably, occasionally erupting in sparks of errant magic. One describes a spell to bind an enemy of Ooos across dimensions, yet the syntax writhes in a way that could just as easily unravel reality if spoken aloud. The archivist studies the scroll closely, feeling the subtle tug of misaligned energy, the latent danger inherent in words that carry power but resist full understanding. Here, magic is not obedient, it is alive, questioning, even fighting against being contained. The archivist recognizes the careful balance required to study these texts without disturbing their precarious equilibrium. Some corrupted scrolls pulse with a rhythmic energy that suggests partial comprehension is possible only under extreme patience. One small manuscript floats in a shallow pool of soft luminescence, its letters curling and folding in on themselves. The incantation within hints at a ritual to reveal hidden truths of collapsed Ooos, but each word fights against linear understanding, scrambling as the archivist's eyes attempt to follow. Finn's courage is reflected in the soft pulses of light, his presence tracing the gaps between the words, suggesting how bravery might guide one through the chaotic energy. Jake bends and stretches along the shapes, connecting patterns that almost form coherence, bridging gaps left by the rebellion of the spell language itself. Some scrolls are semi-sentient, shifting in response to emotion, intent, or even hesitation. The archivist notices one particularly fragile piece, its edges fraying as though anxious, with letters flickering between clarity and chaos. The spell within describes the creation of a ward capable of stabilizing fractured magic across Ooos, yet none the more one looks, the more the letters warp, twisting into almost indecipherable symbols. Bubblegum's intellect and meticulous nature are faintly hinted at in margin notes embedded in the magic, attempts by previous scribes to guide or contain the rogue script. Marceline's song threads through the scroll in fleeting resonance, soft vibrations that ripple through the energy without fully anchoring it. Even Ice King's chaotic influence appears faintly in corrupted bursts, suggesting his whimsical or inadvertent interference had left marks within these texts. Some of the corrupted scrolls are enormous, stretching across floating pedestals or suspended mid-air, their surfaces covered with intertwined languages that seem to argue with one another. One massive scroll appears to describe a spell capable of unweaving layers of reality and reweaving them differently. yet the writing resists linear comprehension. Symbols fold over themselves, letters curl backward, and faint sparks of unstable magic flare intermittently. The archivist studies the text carefully, feeling the subtle tug of latent energy, aware that even a slight misstep could trigger unpredictable consequences. Finn is present in the echoes of the magic, his courage hinted at in traces of luminescence that follow the path of potential understanding, while Jake stretches to connect disparate symbols, forming tenuous bridges through the chaotic landscape of letters. Some scrolls are fragments of rituals so old that even the oldest magic seems to tremble in their presence. A faded parchment hints at an ancient attempt to bind a force older than Ooos itself, the letters alive with a faintly imperceptible pulse. The archivist observes the curling text, noting how the spell language resists being spoken, moving and twisting in almost sentient patterns. Finn and Jake appear as subtle echoes within the energy, representing courage and adaptability in the face of incomprehensible power. Bubblegum's intellect hums faintly along the edges, attempting to stabilize, while Marceline's music threads through like a fragile current, providing resonance to what would otherwise remain chaotic. The archivist senses the tension of creation and destruction, balanced within every line, every arc, every pulse. Some corrupted scrolls seem playful in their resistance, almost taunting the observer with fleeting glimpses of meaning. One spells out instructions for a charm to mend fractured worlds, yet the sentences curl into loops, letters bouncing and intertwining, resisting completion. Finn moves cautiously along the shifting pattern, while Jake morphs to form a delicate bridge across impossible loops. The archivist notes that, even in defiance, magic is never truly malicious. It simply has its own will, a subtle reminder that power carries autonomy, and sometimes insists on being acknowledged rather than controlled. The corridor of corrupted scrolls hums softly with untamed potential. Some hover in the air, edges flickering with sparks of magic. Others rest delicately on cracked pedestals, their letters writhing gently, forming temporary shapes that almost reveal their intent. The archivist moves carefully between them, hands brushing lightly over the surface of hovering manuscripts, feeling the pulse of words that resist being bound, the subtle tension between intention and rebellion. Finn's courage and Jake's loyalty echo faintly in the energy, hinting at the persistent presence of heroism even within unpredictable magic. Bubblegum's intellect threads delicately through residual annotations. Marceline's music hums faintly, and Ice King's chaotic influence flickers like a barely contained current, leaving subtle marks that ripple through the chamber. Some scrolls are partially corrupted, their languages oscillating between comprehension and chaos. One details a spell for uncovering hidden timelines, yet the letters curl and fold unpredictably, forming temporary patterns that shift when observed too closely. Finn appears as a quiet guide, illuminating possibilities, while Jake stretches across the text, linking fragments into tentative coherence. Bubblegum's influence hums faintly along the margins. Marceline's song vibrates subtly, and Ice King's chaotic essence leaves small bursts of erratic energy, introducing minor unpredictability. The spell language itself seems aware of these presences, bending and resisting in response, creating a delicate dance between observer and magic. The archivist pauses before an enormous scroll suspended in midair, its surface glowing faintly with pulsing energy. The spell inscribed within promises the ability to mend fractured magic across multiple Ooos, and the writing writhes as though alive, refusing linear comprehension. Letters fold over each other, symbols twist unpredictably, and faint sparks flare intermittently, carrying residual power that vibrates softly in the air. Finn and Jake's echoes move through the chaos, courage and loyalty leaving traces of light along shifting words. Bubblegum's intellect is faintly present, weaving subtle guidance into the margins. Marceline's music threads delicate resonance through the energy, and Ice King's whimsical chaos flickers sporadically, leaving traces that ripple unpredictably. The Archivist breathes slowly, attuning to the rhythm of the corrupted scrolls, aware that every word, symbol, and pulse carries the tension between intent and autonomy. The magic is alive, refusing to be merely observed or contained, and the corridor vibrates with the quiet insistence of possibility, unpredictability, and latent power. Even in chaos, the echoes of Ooos heroes and the persistence of magic endure, shaping the corridor with a gentle, almost imperceptible pulse that resonates softly through time and space. The Archivist moves carefully along the aisle, letting their eyes and fingers trace the subtle rhythms of the corrupted scrolls. Some of the parchment floats freely, suspended by unseen currents of magic, their edges flickering as letters twist and coil, like serpents resisting confinement. The air hums softly with latent energy, a delicate vibration that speaks of power and intention that refuses to be constrained. Finn appears intermittently in the soft glow of these erratic texts, his courage radiating faintly, providing a guiding pulse that seems to stabilize portions of the wild magic, even if only temporarily. Jake stretches and bends to connect scattered letters and symbols, forming delicate bridges between fragments that might otherwise drift apart into chaotic oblivion. Some scrolls seem semi-conscious, reacting to observation in subtle ways. A particularly large manuscript curls and twists as the Archivist approaches, letters rearranging themselves as though in quiet negotiation. The spell it contains is intended to reveal hidden truths of Oo, yet the language resists comprehension, folding in on itself, breaking and reforming into patterns that hum with latent potential. Finn's courage is hinted at in faint luminescent lines that follow the shifting text, while Jake forms bridging arcs across the moving letters. Bubblegum's intellect threads through marginalia, small traces of stabilizing magic left behind by a previous scribe, and Marceline's music vibrates faintly, giving rhythm to the shifting symbols. Ice King's chaotic energy flickers across the page, subtle but insistent, a reminder that even unfinished interference leaves traces in the magic. Some scrolls pulse with gentle rhythmic energy that suggests partial understanding is possible if approached with care. One delicate piece floats just above a pedestal, its letters curling inward and outward in a pattern that seems almost alive. The spell within is a ritual to restore harmony to fractured realms, yet each word fights against linear comprehension. The Archivist studies the text carefully, aware that a misstep could trigger unpredictable consequences. Finn is present in the faint pulses of light, moving along the spaces between the letters, while Jake stretches and molds to bridge the gaps, connecting threads of magic and intention that the language resists. Bubblegum's subtle annotations guide the energy without fully stabilizing it. Marceline's song weaves through in delicate resonance, and Ice King's erratic influence disrupts the text in faint, unpredictable bursts. Some corrupted scrolls are enormous, stretching across floating pedestals or suspended mid-air, their surfaces covered with tangled layers of symbols that refuse to yield meaning easily. One massive scroll describes a spell capable of unweaving and reweaving layers of reality, yet the letters twist, overlap, and flicker in unpredictable ways. The Archivist watches carefully, fingers hovering over the shifting surface, sensing the latent energy and knowing that even observation affects the outcome. Finn's courage manifests as small, luminous traces along arcs of letters, while Jake bridges disjointed sections, creating fragile connections. Bubblegum's intellect hums faintly along the margins. Marceline's music threads through subtle vibrations, and Ice King's chaotic tendencies leave unpredictable ripples, reminding the archivist of the delicate balance between creation and disruption. Smaller scrolls often behave like living puzzles, letters shifting in response to attention, emotion, or intent. One fragile parchment contains a spell to reveal lost fragments of Ooh, but its writing curls, folds, and occasionally vanishes entirely, reappearing in different configurations. Finn's presence appears as tentative pulses of courage, guiding the viewer through the chaos while Jake stretches to connect the fragmented letters and symbols. Bubblegum's intelligence threads softly through annotations. Marceline's music hums as an undercurrent, and Ice King's whimsical interference sparks subtle disruptions that ripple through the energy. The scroll resists comprehension, yet the archivist senses that understanding can emerge slowly if approached with patience and attentiveness. Some corrupted scrolls are playful in their resistance, teasing observers with fleeting glimpses of meaning that shift before they can be grasped. One describes a charm meant to stabilize fractured kingdoms, yet its letters coil, spiral, and interweave, forming loops that defy linear reading. Finn walks carefully along the luminous arcs of the letters, his courage illuminating possible pathways, while Jake stretches across the loops, creating fragile bridges. The archivist observes closely, noting that the magic within is not malicious, only insistent, asserting its autonomy while offering hints of understanding to those willing to engage gently. The corridor hums with an invisible pulse, a symphony of errant letters, shifting symbols, and latent magic. Some scrolls hang suspended, edges flickering with sparks of energy, while others rest delicately on pedestals, quivering with subtle vibrations. The archivist moves slowly, attuned to the rhythm of the magic, feeling the tension between intention and autonomy in every word, symbol, and pulse. Finn's courage, Jake's loyalty, Bubblegum's intellect, Marceline's music, and Ice King's chaos all echo faintly in the energy, leaving traces that ripple through the room in delicate, interconnected currents. The magic resists containment, yet it also offers insight, patience, and quiet wonder to those willing to listen carefully. The archivist pauses before a particularly large and complex scroll suspended in midair. Its surface a chaotic tapestry of writhing letters, spiraling symbols, and faintly glowing sigils. The energy it radiates is both beautiful and unsettling, a constant reminder that magic here is alive and unwilling to be tamed. This scroll is a map of a spell meant to reconcile fractured realities across multiple Ooos, yet every line and character seems to resist comprehension. Finn's courage manifests as small, luminous pulses along arcs of symbols, guiding fragile pathways through the tumultuous text. Jake stretches and twists to connect letters that seem impossibly scattered, forming temporary bridges that shift and ripple with each movement. Bubblegum's intellect hums faintly through the margins, subtle annotations left behind by long-departed scribes who tried to understand the spell's nature. Her influence does not dominate, but gently steers the energy, offering faint scaffolding in the midst of chaos. Marceline's music threads through the symbols like a soft, invisible melody, resonating in the air and giving rhythm to the disorder, her notes vibrating in harmony with the latent magic. Even Ice King's chaotic energy is present, flickering sporadically, leaving unpredictable imprints on the scroll, reminders that whimsy and randomness are as much a part of magic as intention and courage. The archivist leans closer, fingers hovering above the moving surface. The letters respond subtly, curling and folding in patterns that almost form complete words, teasing understanding but never fully granting it. A fragment of the spell seems to pulse brighter when observed, as if recognizing attention and engaging in a delicate dialogue with the observer. Finn moves lightly through this field, his courage faintly illuminating sections of the text where understanding is possible, while Jake's malleable form bridges the gaps, allowing coherence to appear temporarily before shifting once more. Some scrolls respond to thought and emotion as much as observation. A delicate parchment rests on a pedestal, its edges curling and twisting as if breathing. The spell inscribed is a ritual for summoning long-lost truths of Ooos, yet the letters themselves are fluid, shifting in response to the archivist's focus. Finn's presence is suggested in faint, luminescent traces that move along the edges of the text, his courage lighting the way through the chaos. Jake stretches to form connections, guiding potential meaning along the twisting letters. Bubblegum's intellect hums gently, Marceline's music vibrates softly, and Ice King's influence flares sporadically, introducing small, unpredictable disturbances. The scroll resists comprehension, yet within its resistance lies subtle guidance, if one is patient enough to perceive it. Other scrolls seem almost sentient, their writing reacting to the presence of an observer. A massive scroll hovers near the ceiling, the symbols within twisting and spiraling in complex patterns. Its spell is said to hold the power to mend fractured dimensions, yet the language refuses to submit. Finn's courage radiates faintly along arcs of letters, illuminating possible pathways. Jake stretches to bridge disjointed symbols, connecting ephemeral threads of potential meaning. Bubblegum's marginal notes provide subtle hints of stabilization. Marceline's music hums beneath the surface, and Ice King's erratic influence leaves unpredictable flickers. Each observer interaction changes the scroll subtly, a delicate feedback loop between attention, intention, and magic. The archivist notices smaller scrolls that float freely, their edges shimmering with sparks of volatile energy. One fragment hints at a charm to repair broken timelines, yet its letters twist, overlap, and fold in unpredictable ways, forming loops that resist linear understanding. Finn walks along these arcs cautiously, courage illuminating fragile pathways. Jake stretches and morphs, connecting the loops and offering coherence where none seems possible. The archivist observes patiently, aware that the magic here is autonomous, playful, and resilient, offering understanding only to those willing to move gently and attentively. Some corrupted scrolls vibrate with an almost musical energy, letters curling into arcs that pulse in sync with invisible rhythms. One particular manuscript describes a spell to reveal hidden fragments of Ooos' past and future, yet the writing refuses linear comprehension. Finn's courage manifests as luminescent pulses along arcs of symbols. Jake forms bridges across the gaps, and Bubblegum's intellect hums faintly, attempting to stabilize chaotic energy. Marceline's song threads through the letters in soft resonance, while Ice King's whimsical interference sparks unpredictable bursts, creating a living, shifting puzzle of magic and intention. The corridor itself seems to respond to the presence of these living scrolls. Light bends softly around them, shadows flicker in irregular patterns, and the air vibrates gently with latent energy. The archivist senses the delicate balance of observation and restraint, recognizing that even their attention affects the magic, influencing how it unfolds and shifts. Finn and Jake appear repeatedly in fleeting, luminescent echoes, courage and loyalty providing subtle guidance. Bubblegum's intellect hums quietly, Marceline's music vibrates faintly, and Ice King's chaotic presence flickers softly, leaving trails of unpredictable energy. The archivist steps carefully past a group of hovering scrolls, each vibrating with subtle resistance. Some pulse in rhythmic waves, others flicker in unpredictable sparks. The energy here is alive, responsive, and autonomous, creating a delicate dance between observer and text. Finn's courage, Jake's loyalty, Bubblegum's intellect, Marceline's music, and Ice King's chaos interweave softly through the room, leaving subtle imprints on every fragment of magic. Each scroll is a story, a spell, a fragment of possibility, waiting for patient attention to reveal its potential, yet always retaining its autonomy, a living reminder that magic in its truest form cannot be fully contained. The archivist pauses in the center of the aisle, letting the hum of the corrupted scrolls wash over them. Every letter, symbol, and pulse vibrates with life, intention, and resistance. Even in chaos, the presence of courage, intellect, music, and whimsy remains, a subtle network of influences that stabilize and animate the wild magic. Finn, Jake, Bubblegum, Marceline, and Ice King drift in and out of these fragments, their stories echoing faintly within the texts, hinting at courage, loyalty, intellect, and unpredictability in the face of forces too complex to fully comprehend. The corridor resonates gently, a quiet symphony of living magic, impossible to dominate, but offering insight, patience, and wonder to those willing to engage with its subtle rhythms. The archivist moves deeper into the aisle, aware that each step disturbs the subtle currents of energy weaving through the corrupted scrolls. The air here is dense with magic that refuses to be tamed, a living tension between intention and autonomy. Letters writhe across parchment. Symbols coil into intricate spirals, and faint sparks leap between floating manuscripts. It is as if the scrolls themselves are aware of observation, negotiating silently with anyone who dares to enter their domain. Finn's courage pulses gently within the energy, illuminating tentative pathways across the shifting text, while Jake stretches and bends to connect fragments that threaten to drift apart into incoherence. Some scrolls are more than mere parchment. They seem semi-sentient, their writing responding to thought, emotion, and intention. One enormous manuscript hangs suspended from the ceiling, its surface a chaotic tapestry of letters that pulse with residual magic. The spell it contains is rumored to reconcile fractured realities, yet every line twists and curls in defiance of linear comprehension. Finn moves lightly along arcs of glowing letters, his courage tracing a potential path through chaos. Jake bridges gaps, forming ephemeral connections that shift and ripple with the flow of the spell language. Bubblegum's intellect hums subtly along the margins, guiding without imposing, while Marceline's music threads invisible harmonics through the text. Ice King's unpredictable energy flares sporadically, leaving chaotic traces that ripple gently across the spell. The archivist notices smaller scrolls floating freely, edges flickering with sparks of volatile energy. One fragment suggests a ritual to uncover hidden truths of Ooos' fractured timelines, but its letters fold and coil unpredictably, resisting coherence. Finn's pulses of courage illuminate potential interpretations, and Jake stretches to bridge the most volatile arcs. Bubblegum's subtle guidance hums in faint marginalia, Marceline's song resonates gently through the shifting symbols, and Ice King's whimsical interference adds tiny, unpredictable ripples. Each fragment is alive, a delicate negotiation between observer and magic, requiring patience, attention, and respect. Some scrolls pulse rhythmically as if breathing, their letters curling into spirals and waves. One particularly delicate manuscript contains instructions for stabilizing chaotic magic across multiple Ooos, yet the writing contorts continually, resisting fixed interpretation. Finn appears in glowing traces along the arcs of symbols, while Jake forms tenuous bridges between them. Bubblegum's intellect offers gentle scaffolding. Marceline's music harmonizes faintly with the energy, and Ice King's chaotic tendencies flare sporadically, introducing unpredictable vibrations. The archivist senses the subtle dance between intention and resistance, understanding that the magic here is alive, autonomous, and responsive. The corridor hums with latent energy, a symphony of errant letters, twisting symbols, and flickering sparks. Some scrolls hover midair, edges glowing faintly, while others rest delicately on pedestals, quivering with subtle vibrations. The archivist moves slowly, attuning to the rhythm of the magic, feeling the tension between autonomy and comprehension. Finn's courage, Jake's loyalty, Bubblegum's intellect, Marceline's music, and Ice King's chaos echo faintly in the energy, leaving trails of possibility and resilience that ripple softly through the aisle. The magic resists being tamed, yet offers guidance, insight, and quiet wonder to those willing to approach with patience and care. A particularly volatile scroll floats just above a pedestal, its letters writhing in unpredictable patterns, glowing intermittently with sparks of residual energy. The spell within promises the ability to mend broken timelines, yet the language resists comprehension. Finn's courage illuminates arcs of letters, showing fleeting pathways through the chaos. Jake stretches and bends to form temporary connections, bridging fragments that might otherwise remain inaccessible. Bubblegum's subtle guidance hums in marginalia. Marceline's music threads delicate resonance through the text, and Ice King's chaotic presence flickers, leaving unpredictable but harmless disturbances. The archivist observes closely, aware that even their presence affects the behavior of the scroll, engaging in a delicate, silent negotiation with living magic. Some scrolls are playful in their resistance, almost teasing the observer with fleeting glimpses of meaning that shift when attention is applied. One describes a charm intended to stabilize fractured kingdoms, yet its letters twist and coil into spirals, creating loops that defy linear comprehension. Finn walks along glowing arcs of text, courage illuminating tentative pathways. Jake stretches across the loops, linking fragments into temporary coherence. The archivist notices that the magic is not hostile. It simply has its own will, asserting autonomy, while offering hints of understanding to those willing to engage gently. Other scrolls pulse with musical energy, letters forming arcs that resonate in subtle harmonics. One describes a spell to reveal lost fragments of Ooos, yet its writing folds and shifts constantly. Finn's courage manifests in luminescent pulses along arcs. Jake bridges the gaps. Bubblegum's intellect hums softly. Marceline's music weaves through the symbols, and Ice King's whimsical influence sparks unpredictable bursts. The magic is alive, responsive, and autonomous, requiring delicate interaction, patience, and focus to perceive even faintly. The archivist pauses in the center of the aisle, letting the hum of chaotic magic wash over them. Each letter, symbol, and pulse vibrates with life, energy, and intention. Even in the wildest chaos, echoes of courage, loyalty, intellect, music, and whimsy persist, a network of subtle influence that stabilizes the energy without dominating it. Finn, Jake, Bubblegum, Marceline, and Ice King drift faintly through the scrolls, their stories hinted at but never fully captured, shaping the magic through the quiet presence. The corridor vibrates gently, a living symphony of resistant language, offering insight, wonder, and the quiet beauty of spells that are not easily contained, yet endlessly fascinating to those who linger patiently. The archivist steps into the final aisle, where the air feels softer, almost insubstantial, as though the space itself is made from a thin mist of memory. Here lie the deleted episodes, manuscripts, and crystalline tablets composed entirely in dream language, a subtle, fluid script that cannot be read in ordinary time or space. The letters are shapes, colors, and vibrations rather than words, appearing only when one's mind slows and quiets enough to notice them. The air hums faintly with the faint, shifting light, and the archivist moves carefully, hands brushing lightly over the edges of hovering manuscripts, feeling the gentle pulse of something both familiar and unattainable. The first fragment drifts lazily in a pool of soft luminescence. Its dream language flickers and folds as if aware of being observed, sending ripples across the fabric of the aisle. Finn appears as a quiet, glowing outline within the shimmer, performing acts that feel simultaneously real and imagined, a hero wandering through events that never existed in any fully realized timeline. Jake stretches and curves, connecting intangible threads of narrative, creating fleeting coherence in a story that resists conventional understanding. The energy around them vibrates faintly with the echo of music, laughter, whispers, and footsteps, all lingering as remnants of what might have been. Other fragments are far more abstract, floating in midair like delicate constellations of color and sound. A half-formed adventure flickers faintly, showing bubblegum in a laboratory that exists only in possibility, testing magic that cannot fully exist. Marceline drifts through the scene as notes and melodies, her song captured in a series of pulsing vibrations that ripple outward and then fade before resolution. Ice King is present too, whimsical and unpredictable, leaving chaotic traces that shift the colors and forms around him. The narrative is fragmented and elusive, yet the energy of story is tangible, resonating softly in the mind of the observer, a lullaby for the imagination rather than a conventional tale. Some dream language episodes ripple in and out of perception, their forms changing as the archivist's attention lingers. One manuscript hints at a hidden festival in Ooos, full of color, music, and gentle celebration, yet the forms dissolve before the festivities can be fully witnessed. Finn moves through the energy with quiet determination, courage illuminated in subtle glowing outlines. Jake stretches and bends along shifting shapes, bridging what can be understood with what remains mysterious. Bubblegum's intellect whispers faintly through the crystalline symbols. Marceline's music resonates like soft vibrations, and Ice King's chaotic tendencies ripple unpredictably through the forms, adding delicate, whimsical twists. Other deleted episodes take the form of semi-solid crystals, each containing layers of dream language trapped in soft, shifting waves of light. One crystal depicts an adventure that might have unfolded across multiple Ooos, a delicate interplay of courage, loyalty, intellect, music, and whimsy, yet the events never crystallized into reality. Finn's courage traces soft lines through the shifting forms, while Jake forms bridges across fragments of light and vibration. Bubblegum's subtle guidance hums faintly, Marceline's music threads through in delicate resonance, and Ice King's unpredictable interference flares occasionally, altering the form of the crystal without destroying its coherence. Some fragments are nearly impossible to focus on, existing as fleeting ripples of color and vibration, perceptible only in the quiet, reflective spaces between thought. A half-written adventure plays out as a series of undulating forms, where Finn and Jake move through impossible landscapes that fold back on themselves, and Bubblegum, Marceline, and Ice King appear as currents of energy rather than physical presence. The archivist feels the stories rather than seeing them, sensing the subtle ebb and flow of courage, mischief, intellect, and melody within each fragment. The dream language pulses softly, almost breathing, inviting quiet attention and gentle imagination. Some deleted episodes are larger, sprawling across invisible frames, existing in a space between memories and possibilities. One shows Ooh in a state of quiet reconstruction, as if healed from some past catastrophe that never fully occurred. Finn and Jake drift through these scenes as luminous echoes, their courage and loyalty guiding faint pathways through the shifting forms. Bubblegum's intellect hums subtly. Marceline's music threads through, and Ice King's chaos leaves scattered, whimsical traces. The narrative never fully resolves, instead hovering in the gentle tension between what is imagined and what is lost, offering only the soft resonance of possibility and wonder. Other episodes manifest as delicate, flickering scrolls, each layer shifting continuously as if resisting permanence. One shows a tender, unrecorded moment between Finn and Marceline, their interaction captured in subtle currents of color and vibration rather than words. Jake bridges fleeting moments with fluid arcs of golden light. Bubblegum's intelligence hums faintly along the edges, and Ice King's chaotic impulses scatter the forms lightly. Each fragment exists simultaneously as memory, possibility, and dream, impossible to fix yet tangible in its resonance. The archivist notices clusters of dream language scripts hovering near the ceiling, forming a subtle canopy of soft, moving light. Each script contains fragments of adventures that were never fully realized, playful yet profound, chaotic yet harmonious. Finn moves along invisible threads of courage. Jake stretches across ephemeral bridges. Bubblegum's intellect threads quietly. Marceline's music flows gently, and Ice King's whimsy sparkles intermittently. The stories resist comprehension, yet the energy of narrative pulses softly, offering quiet insight into the worlds that might have existed, whispering gently to the imagination. The air hums with a delicate symphony of unreality, a chorus of adventures never completed, never broadcast, yet eternally resonant. Finn, Jake, Bubblegum, Marceline, and Ice King drift through these unformed stories, leaving trails of courage, loyalty, intellect, melody, and chaos. The dream language pulses softly around them, the letters and symbols shifting, folding, and vibrating with subtle intention. The archivist moves carefully, aware that attention itself shapes the dream language, yet cannot fully control it. Each fragment offers the quiet thrill of unclaimed possibility, a lullaby for the imagination that encourages reflection, wonder, and gentle exploration. The deleted episode's aisle stretches endlessly, a space where time, reality, and memory mingle. Fragments of Oo's history and potential futures float alongside ephemeral echoes of characters, their presence indicated by glowing arcs, subtle vibrations, and gentle pulses of color. Finn's courage, Jake's fluid adaptability, Bubblegum's intellect, Marceline's musical resonance, and Ice King's chaotic whimsy all leave their marks in the dream language, visible only to those who observe quietly and with intention. The energy of story hangs suspended, an endless field of possibility, waiting for patient attention, gentle imagination, and reflective minds to perceive its quiet beauty. The archivist moves slowly through the aisle, letting the hum of dream language wash over them. Each fragment shifts in response to presence and attention, the colors and vibrations weaving together in patterns that almost form scenes but dissolve if observed too directly. Finn drifts through these ephemeral adventures as a faintly glowing silhouette, courage illuminating delicate threads of narrative that would otherwise remain invisible. Jake's flexible form stretches across the gaps, creating temporary bridges between fragments, holding fleeting moments of coherence long enough for them to be sensed, even if never fully understood. Some dream language episodes flicker in and out of perception, revealing delicate, impossible landscape. One fragment shows the Candy Kingdom at twilight, bathed in soft, surreal light, where candy citizens float in gentle patterns, and Marceline's music swirls like color through the air. Finn wanders quietly among them, courage glowing faintly with each step, and Jake moves fluidly alongside him, linking fragments of reality with his stretching form. Bubblegum's intellect hums subtly in the background, shaping faint currents of energy, while Ice King's chaotic whimsy flickers unpredictably, scattering small sparks of playful disruption across the scene. Other fragments exist as semi-solid crystalline forms, capturing entire unspoken adventures in shifting layers of light and vibration. One depicts a hidden grove, a place where ooze magic converges and dissolves simultaneously. Finn and Jake move as echoes within the light, their actions suggested rather than defined, courage and loyalty threading through the fractured energy. Bubblegum's guidance resonates faintly along the crystal surfaces. Marceline's melodies ripple softly, and Ice King's chaotic presence leaves delicate, sparkling imprints that shift the patterns subtly. Even though the narrative is never fully coherent, the energy of story is tangible, a quiet resonance that invites patient attention. Some deleted episodes are delicate, almost imperceptible ripples in the dream language, existing only at the edge of awareness. They show fleeting interactions between characters, brief acts of heroism, moments of humor, and tender gestures that never made it into the fully realized world. Finn's courage glows softly along these ephemeral threads. Jake forms bridges that allow glimpses of continuity, and Bubblegum's intellect hums quietly along edges of possibility. Marceline's music threads through the shifting energy like a subtle current, while Ice King's whimsical interference adds soft, unpredictable flickers, reminding the observer that even chaos can contribute to beauty and resonance. Some dream language scripts spiral like galaxies, letters and symbols forming arcs that twist through invisible dimensions. One such spiral depicts an adventure where Ooh itself seems alive, a landscape of moving color and light that responds to emotion and thought. Finn moves through it as a glowing guide, courage illuminating potential pathways, while Jake's body stretches to connect swirling arcs, creating ephemeral continuity. Bubblegum's intellect hums faintly through the spiral, Marceline's music vibrates as invisible threads, and Ice King's chaotic tendencies flare unpredictably, adding subtle distortions that enhance the vibrancy rather than breaking it. Other fragments are suspended in soft pools of light, appearing almost liquid in their movement. One shows an unrecorded festival where characters gather under floating lights, their forms abstracted into glowing traces of action. Finn's courage threads faint lines through the scene. Jake bridges gaps in perception, and Bubblegum's intellect whispers faint guidance. Marceline's music ripples delicately through the pool, while Ice King's chaotic energy twinkles intermittently, playful and unpredictable. The adventure never completes, yet its resonance lingers, a lullaby of possibility that hums quietly in the mind. Some deleted episodes appear as floating manuscripts, their pages semi-transparent and shifting like clouds. Each page contains layers of dream language, revealing moments that are simultaneously past, future, and entirely imaginary. Finn moves quietly across arcs of glowing letters, courage illuminating the fragments. Jake stretches fluidly, connecting disjointed narrative threads, while Bubblegum's intellect hums faintly, stabilizing sections without dominating them. Marceline's melodies pulse through the pages in gentle rhythm, and Ice King's whimsical energy leaves soft, sparkling traces, reminding the archivist that unpredictability is part of the living magic of these lost stories. The archivist notices clusters of these floating scripts, forming delicate canopies above the aisle, colors and shapes twisting together into soft, moving patterns. Each fragment hints at adventures never broadcast, unspoken heroics, tender interactions, and whimsical chaos. Finn's courage illuminates fleeting pathways through the forms. Jake bridges gaps with fluid arcs. Bubblegum's intellect threads subtle guidance. Marceline's music vibrates gently, and Ice King's chaotic presence flickers unpredictably. The dream language resists full comprehension, yet its energy pulses with quiet life, waiting for patient attention and reflective imagination to sense its beauty. Even as the archivist moves deeper, they sense that these deleted episodes, though inaccessible in ordinary perception, carry the quiet essence of Ooh. Each fragment vibrates with courage, loyalty, intellect, melody, and whimsy, echoing across time and space in ways that are felt more than seen. Finn, Jake, Bubblegum, Marceline, and Ice King drift through these unformed narratives, leaving traces of their presence in the subtle currents of dream language, a quiet reminder that even stories that never existed still shape the imagination and spirit of Ooh. The archivist pauses for a long moment, letting the soft hum of dream language fill the senses. Each fragment shimmers gently, suspended in space like a constellation of forgotten possibilities. Some are small, delicate flickers of light, while others are vast, multi-layered constructs that seem to fold in on themselves endlessly. The letters, symbols, and colors do not conform to conventional language. Instead, they pulse and flow with rhythm, emotion, and intention, revealing themselves only to minds patient and quiet enough to perceive their subtleties. Finn drifts lightly across the edges of these patterns, his courage illuminating the faintest threads of narrative, while Jake morphs fluidly to connect fragments that might otherwise remain isolated, creating fleeting coherence in an otherwise chaotic tapestry. Some fragments appear as glowing ribbons that twist and spiral through the air. One reveals an adventure where Ooh itself breathes and shifts, a landscape alive with possibility, responding to thought and emotion rather than physical interaction. Finn's presence traces luminous arcs through the ribbons, courage lighting a path where coherence emerges only in glimpses. Jake stretches across gaps, forming transient bridges that allow the fragments to pulse in unison for a heartbeat of clarity. Bubblegum's intellect hums faintly along the edges, subtle guidance without dominance, while Marceline's music threads delicate resonance through the shifting forms, creating a rhythm that makes the dream language perceptible. Ice King's whimsical chaos flickers lightly, introducing playful distortions that ripple gently across the forms, unpredictable yet never harmful, reminding the archivist that even randomness has its place in the dance of creation. Other deleted episodes appear as clusters of delicate crystalline shards, each reflecting layers of dream language in soft, shifting colors. One shard depicts an unformed festival in Ooh, where citizens move in fluid arcs of glowing light. Finn drifts among them as a glowing silhouette, his courage leaving faint trails across the shards. Jake stretches to connect fractured moments of interaction, linking shimmering shapes into coherent pulses. Bubblegum's subtle intellect hums in the margins. Marceline's music vibrates faintly through the layers, and Ice King's unpredictable energy sparkles, scattering whimsical touches throughout. The scene never solidifies into a conventional story, yet the sense of narrative lingers as a quiet resonance, a gentle hum of possibility and imagination. Some fragments are almost liquid in their motion, flowing and reforming as the archivist watches. One depicts Finn and Jake wandering through a series of impossible landscapes that fold in on themselves, each step a gentle defiance of linear time. The courage of Finn lights temporary pathways, while Jake stretches fluidly to hold connections between disparate fragments. Bubblegum's intellect threads faintly through the flowing forms. Marceline's song resonates subtly across the surface, and Ice King's chaotic influence adds unpredictable, sparkling ripples. The narrative never fully resolves, yet the energy of story is tangible, felt in the subtle vibrations of light, color, and rhythm. Other deleted episodes drift as floating, semi-transparent manuscripts, pages continuously shifting as if caught in a soft current of air and magic. Each page contains multiple layers of dream language, overlapping and folding into one another in patterns that defy conventional perception. Finn walks along arcs of glowing text, courage illuminating fragile threads of coherence. Jake stretches across gaps, linking fragmented moments into temporary shapes. Bubblegum's intellect hums faintly, providing guidance without imposing order. Marceline's music threads delicate harmonics through the shifting pages, while Ice King's chaotic essence twinkles unpredictably, leaving gentle marks that ripple through the narrative. The stories are ungraspable yet alive, resonating softly in the imagination. Clusters of floating scripts form a subtle canopy overhead, twisting and folding in gentle arcs. Each fragment contains adventures that never aired, tender moments, whimsical encounters, and heroic acts that exist only in possibility. Finn's courage flows as faintly glowing lines illuminating transient pathways. Jake stretches to connect these arcs, forming fleeting bridges between fragments. Bubblegum's intellect hums quietly in the background. Marceline's music vibrates softly through the air, and Ice King's playful chaos flickers, adding unpredictable beauty. The dream language resists full comprehension, yet its resonance is unmistakable, inviting quiet contemplation and imaginative exploration. Some fragments are nearly imperceptible, existing as soft, undulating vibrations at the edge of perception. They reveal brief interactions between characters, moments of bravery, humor, or affection that were never fully recorded. Finn's courage pulses along the edges. Jake bridges ephemeral gaps. Bubblegum's intellect hums subtly. Marceline's music threads through faintly, and Ice King's whimsical energy leaves delicate sparks. The fragments shift in response to attention, giving and taking clarity as if engaging in a quiet dialogue with the observer. Even though the stories cannot be fully grasped, the energy of possibility and wonder remains palpable and serene. Larger dream language episodes stretch across the aisle like flowing tapestries of light and vibration. One depicts Ooos itself as a living entity, landscapes shifting with mood and intention, rivers of glowing color tracing pathways that defy gravity and time. Finn drifts along these glowing arcs, courage lighting potential routes through the fluid narrative. Jake stretches across the flowing threads, linking fragments that shift constantly. Bubblegum's intellect hums faintly through the patterns. Marceline's music resonates in gentle waves, and Ice King's whimsical influence sparkles, scattering unpredictable yet harmonious touches across the scene. The narrative resists completion, existing instead as an endless, quiet meditation on possibility, heroism, and imagination. The archivist breathes slowly, attuning to the subtle pulse of the dream language. Each fragment hums softly with courage, loyalty, intellect, music, and whimsy echoing faintly through the aisle. Finn and Jake drift among these ephemeral adventures, their presence a constant yet delicate stabilizing influence. Bubblegum, Marceline, and Ice King leave traces of intellect, melody, and chaos, threading the fragments into an interconnected, living tapestry. The deleted episode's aisle stretches endlessly, a quiet expanse where time, reality, and imagination meet, offering patient observers the gentle beauty of stories that exist only in potential, waiting to be felt, sensed, and imagined. The archivist pauses in the center of the aisle, letting the gentle hum of the dream language wash over them completely. The fragments drift lazily in pools of iridescent light, folding in and out of perception as if breathing. Each layer is a whisper of stories that never existed in the broadcast world, but which pulse with life nonetheless. Finn moves through them as a soft, glowing echo, his courage illuminating delicate paths that shimmer briefly and then dissolve into the ambient light. Jake stretches, morphing across gaps that defy physical dimensions, forming bridges between narrative threads that are otherwise impossible to follow. Some fragments spiral like slow-moving galaxies, each swirl a self-contained adventure that resists fixation. One forms the outline of an unseen duel, faint sparks of magic dancing in fluid arcs where Finn's bravery and Jake's adaptability guide the potential motion of events. The observer can sense Bubblegum's intellect in soft glimmers along the edges, Marceline's music as subtle ripples that resonate across multiple layers, and Ice King's chaotic energy flickering unpredictably. Playful and harmless, introducing twists that shift perception but do not disrupt the fundamental harmony of the space. These deleted episodes are alive, autonomous, and responsive, offering beauty and insight to those patient enough to perceive them. Other fragments drift as crystalline forms, fragile yet persistent, reflecting soft light and moving rainbows that ripple with every subtle vibration of attention. One shard contains a festival in Ooos that never existed in any timeline, where candy citizens float gracefully in arcs of color and music. Finn's luminous outline drifts through, courage marking the rhythm of the event, while Jake stretches to connect moments that would otherwise remain disconnected. Bubblegum's subtle guidance hums through, Marceline's song threads delicate harmonics, and Ice King's playful interference sparkles intermittently, creating a sense of gentle unpredictability. The festival never resolves into a traditional story, but its resonance is tangible, a lullaby of possibility and imagination that fills the aisle with quiet wonder. Some dream language episodes are almost imperceptible, barely vibrating at the edge of awareness, yet even these carry emotion and intent. They hint at tender interactions, acts of heroism, or fleeting moments of humor and playfulness. Finn's courage illuminates threads through these ephemeral pulses. Jake stretches across invisible gaps. Bubblegum's intellect hums faintly along the edges. Marceline's melodies ripple gently, and Ice King's whimsical energy flickers lightly. The fragments shift subtly in response to presence, creating a delicate dialogue with the observer, as though the stories themselves recognize the attention and respond with a soft acknowledgement of being noticed. The larger episodes form flowing tapestries of light and vibration, stretching across invisible dimensions. One depicts Ooos as a living, breathing entity, its landscapes bending, folding, and shimmering with a quiet, playful energy. Finn glides along glowing arcs, his courage tracing possible routes through the fluid narrative, while Jake morphs to create connections that persist just long enough to be sensed. Bubblegum's subtle influence threads faint patterns of intellect through the flowing forms. Marceline's music hums like a quiet undercurrent, and Ice King's chaotic energy sparkles unpredictably, scattering whimsical touches that enhance the ethereal beauty of the scene. Nothing is fixed, nothing is final, and yet the stories radiate a calm, quiet significance that fills the heart and mind with wonder. The archivist moves slowly, letting the aura of the dream language envelop every sense. Each fragment pulses gently with courage, loyalty, intellect, melody, and whimsy, echoing faintly through the endless aisle. Finn and Jake drift among the ephemeral adventures, leaving traces of presence that lend coherence to the shifting forms. Bubblegum, Marceline, and Ice King thread subtle influences through the fragments, harmonizing chaos and structure in delicate patterns that are almost perceptible. The Isle itself feels alive, a quiet symphony of potential, a meditation on stories that never were but which still resonate deeply in the imagination. Even the smallest fragments hold beauty. A flickering thread might depict a conversation between Finn and Marceline that never happened, a tender exchange of unspoken words. Another might capture a fleeting act of kindness from Jake, a laugh shared between characters, or a glimmer of heroism in a moment lost to the timelines. The dream language pulses softly with these echoes, revealing only what patience and gentle attention can coax forth. The archivist watches quietly, sensing the resonance of these unformed stories in every corner of the Isle. Each fragment hums with life, subtle yet insistent, offering a lullaby of possibility that resonates more deeply than any conventional tale. As the archivist continues down the aisle, the fragments seem to gather faintly around them, forming delicate currents of light and vibration that ripple gently through the space. Finn's courage, Jake's loyalty, Bubblegum's intellect, Marceline's music, and Ice King's playful chaos move through these currents, leaving traces that shimmer in the soft glow of dream language. Each story remains incomplete, impossible to fix fully, yet entirely present in the subtle interplay of perception and imagination. It is a space of quiet wonder, where the observer is invited to linger without expectation, to feel rather than analyze, to experience the gentle resonance of possibilities unbound. Finally, the archivist pauses at the center of the aisle, letting the quiet hum of unformed adventures wash over them completely. The deleted episodes shimmer and fold gently around the space, a soft ocean of color, light, and vibration that holds the echo of Ooos itself. Finn, Jake, Bubblegum, Marceline, and Ice King drift among the fragments, their presence a reminder that even stories that never existed still carry the essence of courage, loyalty, intellect, melody, and whimsy. Each pulse, flicker, and ripple is a reminder that imagination can preserve what reality sometimes forgets, that the possibilities of Ooos extend beyond the aired episodes, lingering quietly in spaces only the most patient observers can sense. And so the archivist steps back, allowing the Isle to breathe, to pulse, to shimmer in gentle, unending patterns. The deleted episodes remain suspended, alive in the quiet resonance of dream language, an infinite library of what could have been. The stories are not lost. They simply exist in a place where time, perception, and imagination blend seamlessly, a gentle reminder that even absence carries a presence of its own. And with that, as the light of the Isle flickers softly and the hum of dream language drifts into silence, it is time for all of us to let our minds settle, to drift, to rest, and to dream. Good night.